Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobooks. American comic, I am the leader of the mutant race. Chapter 1 The leader of the mutant tribe who was transported through time. In the dim stone passage, dozens of blue-black transmission tubes pierced the red-gold personal armor, and streams of golden energy were sucked into the body by the four-eyed ferocious humanoid monster at the end of the transmission tube. The woman who was fixed in midair by the suspended lock kept opening and closing her lips, but her congenital deafness prevented her from making any sound. The strength of the struggle became smaller and smaller, and an abnormal blue-gray color gradually spread upward from the soles of the feet. After a while, the woman's mouth opened for the last time, and her neck tilted as she exhaled her last breath. Died. The suspended locks were automatically unlocked, and the woman's body fell heavily. The moment it collided with the stone floor, there was a dull sound of gold and stone hitting each other. The transmission tube quickly retracted to the back of the humanoid monster, and it lay on the ground in pain, howling like a beast. The muscles and bones on the limbs and torso are trembling and tightening horribly, as if some kind of mutation has occurred. As golden light surged throughout the body, the monster's size gradually shrank, and its bones and muscles became tighter and tougher after being reshaped. Pieces of smooth and tender skin covered the bloody muscles, and blue-black hair strands emerged from the hair follicles on the top of the head. The four narrow eyes disappeared, replaced by two human eyes with golden double pupils. The wailing gradually disappeared, and the sound of human breathing appeared in the dim stone corridor. What reappeared here instead of the monster was a naked western white man with smooth muscle lines, an extremely handsome face, shiny black and green hair, and closed eyes. Brush! The man's eyes suddenly opened, and his double pupils zoomed several times before freezing. The confused expression unique to humans also appeared on that handsome but scumbag face. I'm finally a human again. This is the Earth Iraq of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. My identity is a mutant race that was wiped out by the Eternal Race. The current appearance is that of a mercenary killed by me. His name is Yuri Ambrosius. The man lay blankly on the ground, digesting several memories in his brain with very different painting styles. In one memory, he was a creature created by the Celestials and released to the Earth. After wiping out dinosaurs and other large animals, he was sealed under the glacier of Alaska by the Eternals, released again by the Celestials. In the second type of memory, he is an eternal race created by the Celestial group. After completing the task of eliminating the mutant race, he has been staying on the Earth, and was killed by himself in the previous type of memory not long ago. In the third memory, he is a Chinese citizen in the 21st century. He grew up in peace and was only exposed to war and death on the screen. In this memory, all the nouns in the previous memory come from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The fourth kind of memory is the shortest, but especially real. He knows that his name is Yuri Ambrosius, he knows his closest family and friends, and the rest are all blank. These memories are messy, just like drinking mangpo soup mixed with water, but for him now, they are the only nourishment that gives life to his soul. The dull eyes gradually became brighter, and various complex expressions appeared on this handsome face. The man sat up and looked around at his current appearance. From now on, I am the traveler of the Earth. The leader of the mutant race in the Marvel movies. Yuri Ambrosius. A moment later, Yuri, wearing a dusty camouflage uniform, appeared under a huge triangular aircraft. With a few random clicks on the floating ball held in the palm of his hand, this huge prehistoric aircraft instantly became invisible, took off, and landed on the back of the moon under his command. He remembered that Yuri, who was now himself, had completed his summer job, but before leaving, he took another job in Afghanistan. Search for the boss of Tucker Industries, the leader of the novice village of the Time Traveler, the future Iron Man, and Thanos' lifelong enemy Tony Stark. Open the portable computer in the backpack, and click on the email with the mission introduction. Tony Stark, the son of Howard Stark, quickly gained people's attention with his extraordinary intelligence in his youth. I made a circuit board at the age of 4 and my own engine at the age of 6. At the age of 17, I graduated from MIT with the highest honors. Due to the heavy blow of the death of my parents, I didn't turn around until I was 21 and returned to Stark. Industrially developing weapons and holding the supreme power of the weapons empire, he developed his father's legacy to new heights, opened up a new pattern in the world of weapons, and was a defender of freedom in the United States of America. Everyone who finds the target will get $100 million, and an additional $1,000 million will be rewarded if the target is rescued. The cynical handsome face was frozen on the screen, and the High Commission shone with the light of wealth. Yuri's brain was working rapidly, and he quickly found corresponding clues in the remembered movie plot: Afghanistan, Khulna Province. Set off. Before the sun shines on the Iraqi land, Yuri rushes back to the mercenary base. After skillfully greeting the brothers who he remembered carrying guns through the hail of bullets together, he got into his small tent and quickly packed his personal belongings. Turn in firearms and bullets. Before leaving, Yuri checked the balance in his bank card, looked at the long 6-digit number on it, and secretly sighed. To work in summer vacation, you have to go to other places, the salary is high, and you can experience life, the best of both worlds. When I arrived at the airport with a backpack and a suitcase, it was dusty and almost everyone was wearing a hood and goggles. He also put on black goggles and a cocky turban with peace of mind, covering his shining golden eyes and blue-black hair that was different from ordinary people. Yuri! Come here! The transport plane is about to take off. Across the vast yellow sand, he saw a figure standing under the transport plane waving to him from a distance. This man is one of the recipients of the search mission and the leader of Yuri's search team. Running over quickly, Yuri tied the suitcase and backpack to the fixed goods in the warehouse. Mr. Captain, I guess I am not late, right? Yes, of course. The captain pulled up the operating lever, and the huge door of the transport warehouse slowly rose and closed. He put his mouth close to the walkie-talkie. Ordered the captain to take off, walked to Yuri's side, patted his shoulder hard and said, "But you are the last one." Yuri tied up and saluted, and took a few pages of action planning from the captain's hand. After reading it, he found that 60% of it was an introduction to the importance of Tony Stark, and the rest was the deployment of search personnel. The transport plane trembled and flew up into the clouds, so powerful that everyone tilted towards the tail of the plane. The captain barely stood still while holding the cargo. When the plane stabilized, he raised the identical mission plan in his hand. "Guys, we are operating together with the US military, so please God bless us. It is best if we can find out first. Goal, otherwise you won't get the commission, and you'll even have to pay for your trip home. God bless. Times N." After folding the plan and putting it in his breast pocket, Yuri reached out to take the M14 handed over by the captain. After deftly disassembling and inspecting it, he flipped his fingers and assembled all the parts in less than a second. He raised his head and glanced at his teammates. No one in the bumpy cabin noticed anything unusual about him. After slinging the gun, he leaned back and began to sleep. It would still be a long time before arriving in Afghanistan, and he had not slept a wink last night, so he just took this opportunity to replenish his energy. Chapter 2 Bad Old Man is Very Bad. Hey! Summer job! Wake up! Yuri opened his eyes, and the bright golden eyes under the goggles flashed with dazzling light. The captain who rudely woke him up looked at him, and he actually felt the fear from the origin of life. The golden light flashed past, and then the pupils turned completely white, and the captain's palm that patted Yuri's shoulder was naturally retracted, and he forgot everything he saw just now without knowing it. He took out a box of bullets from the big box in his arms and threw them into Yuri's arms, reminding casually, "Afghanistan is a dangerous place, it doesn't matter if you can't earn commissions, the most important thing is to save your own life, understand yet?" "Yes sir." Yuri agreed happily. He could sense the man's kindness towards him. Take out the bullets from the bullet box and fill your own magazine with the speed loader. Several teammates around him laughed at the captain who was distributing ammunition. "Sir, that's not what you told us just now. I remember someone just said, it doesn't matter if you lose your life, this money is enough for your family to live happily for the rest of their lives, isn't it?" The captain took out a box of ammunition and threw it at the speaker's head. "You son of a bitch, of course the whole family will be happy if you die. Don't forget, guys, our dear little Yuri is only 20 years old this year. He's coming. I'm just here to work a summer job to cope with the school's social tasks." The person who was hit easily caught the bullet box, so the topic shifted to whether the 20-year-old Yuri had touched the girl's hand. The captain's throwing skills were really bad. He must not be allowed to throw grenades. Yuri tightened his hood to prevent wind and sand, and quietly pressed his magazine. He knew that these jokes were just a way for his teammates to relieve tension. When the hatch opened and everyone jumped out one by one, no one would remember what he had just said. 1 clip full, 2 clips full, 3 clips full. Shaking the remaining 2 empty magazines in his hand, he carried 10 full round magazines on his back and said to the soldier who was thrown an extra box of ammunition by the captain, "Mind giving me that box of ammunition? If you can't use it all." "Of course." The soldier glanced at the 10 magazines lined up on his waist, smiled and joked with the people around him. Our summer worker must have disliked the thin body armor, so he thickened it. Look at the ring around his waist. I dare to swear to God, no one can blow out his kidney. All the soldiers laughed, and Yuri also laughed. If I remember correctly, my current situation seems to be a kind of disease in the Huguo of the earth in the 21st century. What is it called? Insufficient firepower syndrome. Drib. 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 The alarm sounded suddenly before the hatch was opened. All the mercenaries stopped and checked their equipment in unison. Then they carried their parachute bags and separated the two sides of the cargo hold according to their seats. As the cabin door slowly opened, the captain shouted in the fierce wind, "Our salute will be sent to the US military base. I hope that after the mission is over, I don't have to personally return the luggage of you sons of bitches." Knock. The hatch was fully opened, and the withered yellow ground of Afghanistan came into view. The few mercenaries in the front row looked at each other, ran a few steps without hesitation, and jumped down. The captain squeezed in front of Yuri, turned around and helped him get dressed. "Follow me, this mission is very simple, and we will all be very safe." Yuri nodded. All the scenes in his memory seemed to him as if he were actually there. He also inherited the strong physique of the mutant race. It's just skydiving. Even if you don't open the parachute bag and fall freely, you will only suffer minor injuries when you hit the ground. You know, he is the main culprit for the extinction of the dinosaurs. A weapon created by the Celestials. The lifelong enemy of the Eternals. The boss of the mutant race. Yuri. Ambrosius. The body soared into the air, and the airflow hit his face. The withered yellow ground was approaching quickly, and Yuri spread his hands, enjoying the feeling of free fall. Suddenly, the captain's roar came from the headset, "Yuri! Open your parachute! Yuri! Do it immediately!" "Yes, sir." The parachute bag behind him opened suddenly, and the strong pulling force slowed down his fall instantly. Controlling the parachute and approaching the captain, he asked loudly, "Captain, where are we going to land?" "There is a group of armed men at 10 o'clock. Let's grab a car and then set off." Yuri was stunned for a moment, and yelled at the captain not far away, "Fuck you, mother! Mr. Captain! Is this what you said? It would be safer to follow you." The two landed smoothly on a ridge. The captain turned on the locator and watched his teammates disperse into designated positions in twos and twos. He patted the angry Yuri and comforted him, "Believe me, kid, you will definitely follow me the safest. I believe you a ghost." The two stopped bickering and walked 2,000 meters to the top of the mountain with guns in hand. After occupying the commanding heights, the captain took out his binoculars to detect the enemy's situation. "There are only 9 people left here. I will fight with you to make a quick decision." Yuri wiped the sweat from his forehead. Which he did deliberately in order not to appear abnormal. He didn't talk nonsense to the bad old man. He quickly opened his gun and opened the mirror, and exploded the head of the enemy on the far right 300 meters away. "Good accuracy." The captain nodded with satisfaction and raised his gun to shoot, not to be outdone, but his hand speed could not compare to the inhuman Yuri. In just 2 breaths, everything settled. The firefight was over. Yuri smiled and patted the captain on the shoulder. 9 people, I'll kill 6, you kill 2.5, you'll catch me later. Come and drive." The captain shrugged indifferently. Whether or not he could find Tony depended on luck. It didn't matter who drove or chose the direction. The two found a khaki armored vehicle with a full fuel tank. The captain found a bottle of spray paint and wiped off the large circle pattern formed by 10 small circles on the door. "This thing is so ugly, you should only use it if your head is broken. It makes a sign." "You're right." Yuri nodded in agreement and walked quickly to the militant who was crippled by the captain just now. Ignoring the other person's begging for life, a hair on the back of his head suddenly stretched and pierced into his neck in the other person's frightened eyes. After getting what he wanted, he stood up, took a dirt gun that fell on the ground, and pointed it at his former master. Ta ended the other person's life. Anyone who shoots with a gun on the battlefield in the Middle East, including him, deserves death. The captain in the distance was stuffing gasoline cans into the trunk. When he saw Yuri coming, he shouted, "Come here and help, you lazy guy." Helping him fill the trunk, he also carried a few boxes of ammunition and threw them in the back seat. The two got into the car and sat down. Yuri ignited the engine and said, "Mr. Captain, please fasten your seat belt." The captain glanced at him, and saw that he hadn't stepped on the gas pedal for a long time, so he obediently obeyed, and kept muttering, "Which mercenary needs to wear a seat belt? I've never worn a seat belt in a car," and so on. If. Boom. Yuri stepped on the accelerator, and the engine was dried until it stalled. He smiled at the captain friendly. I'm very sorry, Mr. Captain, my driver's license only allows me to drive a bicycle. But rest assured, there is no safer place in Afghanistan than in my car. Hearing these familiar words, the captain grabbed the armrest above his head with one hand and pressed the personal computer on his leg with the other hand. Oh, I bought it. I want to get off. Chapter 3 Perfect Sneak. The operation of the armored vehicle is actually not that difficult. If you just want it to run, one hand is enough. But if you want it to fire ammunition as required and cause damage, you do need professional knowledge in the relevant field. Yuri drove all the way west. Tony was kidnapped by the False 10 Rings gang. The logo of the False 10 Rings gang is a large circle composed of 10 small circles connected together, and this logo is the one that was obliterated by the captain. With the attitude of giving it a try, he read the memory of the militant who was beaten to death by the captain, and indeed got some information. Not long ago, the gang leader kidnapped a certain big shot and escorted him to a more hidden base. It's a pity that this person hasn't read many books, he only knows that he is heading west. And he doesn't even know the exact distance. Hey, kid! The captain, who had just gotten used to an unreliable driver, clicked on his personal computer. Are you sure you want to go west? You must know that our search range is originally the fringe. If you go further west, it will be really impossible. Human land. No man's land. Yuri forcibly drove the armored vehicle up a hill with a 2,000-degree slope. After parking the car, he pointed to a thin wisp of cooking smoke meters away. Cooking smoke won't be lit in no man's land, unless there are smart people here. The monkeys learn to cook behind our backs. The captain squinted his eyes and looked at it. Under the setting sun, the smoke was so thin that it seemed to be disconnected at any time. He picked up the binoculars and observed carefully, and easily saw a flag fluttering in the wind. The pattern on it was exactly the same as the pattern that he had erased on the car door. Oh my god! He punched Yuri hard on the chest. It doesn't matter whether there is a target hidden here or not, as long as this address is reported to the US military, we will earn money this trip. Yuri took some cans of beer from the car and lit the portable gas stove to cook the food while the weather was still bright. He glanced at the captain who was hesitating with his personal computer, turned off the stove and invited him to sit down and eat. It's almost dark, how about a gamble? The captain pried open the can, squeezed the beer in the can and drank it in one gulp. After a cheerful nice, he opened another bottle and bumped it hard with Yuri. Then let's take a gamble. 2 machine guns, 3 machine gunners, no watchtowers, no searchlights, the patrols change every 3 hours, and their attitude is extremely slack. The two hid in a small mountain col about 500 meters away from the pseudo 10 Commandments gang, putting their heads together to summarize the intelligence they observed. The captain pulled out 2 silencers from behind his waist, and each of them installed them on their own muzzles. After carefully checking the equipment again, the captain repeated the previous battle plan: sneak in. Our goal is not to be discovered by anyone. I will go before you, and I will control you. If you are discovered, I will draw firepower, and you can escape as soon as possible. The address has been sent to the US military, we only have half an hour. Young summer workers, are you ready? Yuri, yes sir. Action. Yuri watched the captain crawl forward 200 meters with his waist bent, before he swaggered out from behind the small hill. In order to become human again, he killed and absorbed the abilities of 4 eternal warriors: Ajako's healing ability, Fasto's scientific research and creation ability, Druid's mind control and Mockery's superpower. Speed. After being absorbed by him, these abilities became extremely weak, completely unable to reach the level of the eternal warriors in memory, but it is still very simple to manipulate the spirit of 1 or 2 people. The 2 members of the 10 Rings gang who were responsible for guarding the machine gun looked as if they were stupid. They took the initiative to pose so that they would not be discovered even if they died, and watched Yuri fire a dull bullet at them, and then died happily. Just as he was about to lift his foot to leave, he suddenly felt a little bit reluctant. So Yuri squatted on the ground and worked for a while, removed the bracket of the machine gun, and disassembled the fuselage separately. After wrapping his body full of bullet chains, he nodded in satisfaction and continued walking to the next checkpoint. Repeat the same trick and kill the machine gunner here. He removed the bracket, carried the M14 behind his back, picked up a pound machine gun with one hand, and walked toward the base along the shadow of the corner with bullet chains wrapped around his shoulders. Sneak into? The most perfect sneak is to kill all the enemies who see you. Tat 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 tat. Suddenly there was a fierce exchange of fire in the base. Yuri looked up and saw that the bad captain had been discovered by the enemy, and the two sides were engaged in a fierce encounter. Looking at the rapidly brightly lit base, he activated his super speed and rushed towards the battlefield quickly, standing slyly behind the members of the Ten Rings gang who were beating up the captain. Tat 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 tat. Bullets as dense as a level 12 rainstorm were fired from behind, and the powerful recoil was transmitted along the gun body to the holder. But the powerful power of the mutant race allows him not only to withstand this counterattack, but also to aim and shoot with ease. The captain 100 meters away hid behind the bunker and took out a small mirror to observe the source of heavy firepower. When he saw Yuri, who was holding a machine gun and looked like a Terminator, he couldn't help cursing. I'm T-Faco. In the deep and winding cave, behind the heavy and airtight iron door, Tony Stark, who was banging on a piece of steel, suddenly frowned. He turned his ear and asked Ethan, who was posing in the same posture, "Did you hear that?" "Mr. Ethan?" "Yes, sir." A trace of relief appeared on Ethan's weathered face. He put down the work in his hands and gently patted the inmate on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Mr. Stark, you can be released from prison early." A smile appeared on Tony's gloomy face for a long time. He excitedly saved his friend and patted his back hard. "It's not me, it's us. You and I can finally leave this hellish place." Ethan smiled and said nothing, with an inexplicable gleam in his eyes. He pulled out a set of body armor from under the mattress and handed it to Tony. "Put it on quickly, victory is ahead, and you don't want to fall short, do you?" Tony hurriedly put on the body armor, but found that Ethan didn't make the next move. He asked suspiciously, "What about yours, Ethan?" "Don't worry, I can help you put it on." Ethan shook his head with a smile, looked at Tony and said lightly, "I'm sorry Mr. Stark, I lied to you before." "No. Ethan, we agreed to go out together." "Mr. Stark, my family members died in the war, and the weapons that killed them were produced by your Stark Industries." "I'm sorry, Ethan, I'm sorry, but you saved me. Then cherish it and don't waste your life." Bang! The militants outside the door violently pushed the iron door open, and Ethan didn't even look at the menacing thugs. He pulled out a single-handed repeating rifle from the back of the workbench, and said to Tony with a joking smile, "Look. Just like they didn't notice you secretly making weapons, you didn't notice me either, Mr. Stark." As soon as he finished speaking, the smile on his face disappeared instantly. He pulled the bolt of the gun and turned around. The bullet that came out of the barrel was like a poisonous snake, biting the thugs who hurriedly fought back. "Don't worry about me, Mr. Stark. I'm just going to meet my family at people." "No. Ethan." Chapter 4 Taking Pictures. As luck would have it, Yuri happened to be standing above the tunnel where Tony was imprisoned. After sensing the gunshots coming from under his feet, he quickly arrived right above the entrance of the tunnel and threw 2 grenades in without any sense of martial ethics. Boom! Boom! The screams came as expected. Yuri glanced at the false Ten Rings gang members lying outside the tunnel, and said in a loud voice to the captain who was peeping his head not far away, "My dear Mr. Captain, as you can see, the battle plan is out. There was a little problem. You deal with these outside, and I'll deal with the rats inside. Time is running out." Da-da-da. The captain raised his gun and killed a thug who was preparing for a near-death counterattack, responding to the newly formulated Plan B with action. Seeing this, Yuri stopped talking nonsense, found a good posture and jumped down facing the entrance of the cave. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The machine guns crossed and swept out a barrage, splitting the enemies in the narrow passage into 2 pieces. Yuri's pace was slow but determined, and he was not worried at all that his target would be killed first. As long as these militants had a little bit of brains, they would not kill the only bargaining chip with him. Dang dang dang! Bullets hit the steel door. This heavy iron door that was once used to imprison Tony and Ethan has now become the last barrier for the surviving false Ten Rings gang members. Yuri released the trigger, and the machine gun's turntable slowly slowed down until it stopped. There were rapid footsteps behind him, as well as the captain's rapid breathing. "Oh, I bought it." After checking up and down to make sure Yuri was not injured, the captain pinched his exposed skin again, and after confirming that he could feel the warmth of his flesh and blood, he leaned in the passage and said with a sigh on his face, "I am really blind to believe this. You are a sophomore in college and have a summer job, Yuri, you are actually a robot, right? Like the Terminator." "I hope so too." Yuri knocked on the thick iron door with the muzzle of his machine gun, and continued with a look of helplessness, "Then I can understand what they are talking about. Hey hey. After successfully attracting the attention of the leader of the Ten Rings gang, Tony frowned at Ethan, who was bleeding but not dead. The naughty mustache jumped twice, and the man cursed by knowledge suggested in the Afghan language that he had been trying to make up for these days. I don't know if my pronunciation is correct, but you can probably understand what I am talking about. The guys outside are undoubtedly the ones who saved me. If you want to survive, you'd better keep me and my friends safe. Tony shrugged helplessly. As you can see, rude guy, I don't understand what you are talking about at all. If you don't revive Ethan, the two of us can only communicate in one way. Help glared at him fiercely, waved his hand and ordered his men to get medical equipment to treat Ethan. Who? Tony took a deep breath and gestured towards the door. If you don't mind, I can negotiate with them for you. The gang leader hesitated for a moment, then grabbed Tony by the back of his neck and slammed his face against the cold door. This is uncomfortable. Tony was about to change into a more comfortable position when he saw a rifle pressed against the back of his head. Mustache jumped twice unconsciously, and he shrugged resignedly. Okay, so be it. The captain outside the door saw a little face squeezed out of the observation hole, cautiously approached and asked, Mr. Tony Stark? Yes, that's right. Tony exposed his eyes and saw that there were only two people in the long and narrow corridor. His eyebrows twitched involuntarily. I'm sorry, how many people are there now? The captain turned to look at you, who was sharpening his knife. Here, he spread his hands in embarrassment, as you can see, they are all elites. Oh, I bought it. Tony rolled his eyes, feeling like there was no hope for the future. Upon seeing this, the captain quickly added, Mr. Stark, we have reported our location to the US military before the operation. They will be here in 5 minutes at most. Tony blinked and suddenly spoke very quickly, explaining the positions of everyone in the door. At the end, he added, there is also a wounded person here who has lost too much blood. I don't think he can last 5 minutes. Dear two elites, if you can rescue us from the clutches of Tony Stark before he dies, in addition to the rewards you should receive, you will also receive an additional $1,000 million and Tony Stark's friendship. How about it, two elites? The captain wanted to refuse as soon as he heard this. They have successfully found Tony Stark and can get a commission of $100 million per person. This money is enough to live happily in the United States for a long time. Rescuing Tony can certainly get an additional commission of $2,000 million, but if the operation is unsuccessful, Tony will most likely not die, but he and Yuri will definitely be sifted by this group of militants who are driven to a dead end. Mr. Stark, the best way is to wait for the arrival of the US military. I agreed. The captain stared dumbfoundedly at Yuri, who had removed the bullet chain and machine gun from his body, wrapped his head and held two small daggers. Fuck you, Yuri. Have you gone crazy after falling in the eyes of money? Yuri stuffed the dagger into his lower back, patted the captain's shoulder to reassure him, walked to the iron gate, and took out his cell phone in a hurry, taking a picture of Tony in the crack of the door. Photo. After confirming that Tony had seen the photo in the album, he handed the phone to the captain, smiled evilly and threatened, if you dare to default on your account, this photo will be posted online. Oh, you are such a bad boy. Tony rolled his eyes, tilted his head and said, so I'm going to deal with these thugs now, so that you won't be shot to death as soon as you come in, okay? Okay. Yuri nodded in response and walked up to the captain. He looked at the masked man with a serious face and carefully checked the equipment. Suddenly he remembered that he didn't even know his name. Mr. Captain. Shut up, boy. The captain raised his head and glared at him fiercely. I'm so hurt by you that I'll be able to see God immediately. Yuri chuckled, patted his shoulder and continued, well, my poor Mr. Captain. You can't expect me to keep calling you Mr. Captain when you get to heaven, right? It fark. The captain raised his head again, his only exposed eyes filled with confusion. Didn't I tell you my name? Yuri shrugged. If I remember correctly, that's indeed the case. The man hummed, arranged his equipment and stood up. He took off the glove on his left hand, slapped it hard on his thigh a few times and stretched it out towards Yuri. Max Spector, it's a pleasure to meet God with you. Yuri froze for a moment, took off his gloves, held Mark's hand tightly and said with a smile, you must not see God, because your soul belongs to the moon. What the hell are you talking about? Mark hit him hard on the shoulder and patted him hard on the back. Stay alive, you bastard. When you get back to the United States, I will introduce you to a group of hot girls. Dang! 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 The thugs inside fired several bullets at the iron door to make noise, signaling for the two to open the door and enter. Yuri shrugged and let Mark stand in front of him indifferently. Chapter 5 2 Transactions. Creak, creak, creak. The hinges of the iron door were obviously not well maintained, and the harsh and unpleasant friction sound resounded through the dark tunnel and crowded room. All the armed men stood ready. They silently pointed their guns at the crack of the door that gradually opened, and silently opened the safety of the guns in their hands. Squeaky. After revealing a gap big enough for a pound-fat man to pass through, Mark and Yuri jointly removed their hands from the iron door's ring. Da-da-da-da-da. Some militants hiding in the house could not bear the pressure of silence and suddenly pulled the trigger the moment the iron door stopped turning. The raging rain of bullets hit the thick door panel, scaring Mark so much that he immediately closed the door. Boom! 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 The sound of a pistol firing was heard, and then the sound of dead people falling to the ground was heard. Yuri stopped Mark's movements, stuck his head out and took a quick glance at the situation inside. He yelled at the top of his lungs, "Fuck you, Tony! Is this the damn safety you're talking about?" Sorry. Tony's distinctive voice sounded inside, and then the two of them heard him negotiating with the boss of the Pseudo Ten Rings gang in an unfamiliar language. "Hey Mark!" Yuri patted Mark in front of him on the shoulder and pulled out 2 smoke bombs from his waist. "I have a new plan." Mark turned around, saw the thing in his hand and whispered in a disgusted tone, "What are you doing on horseback?" Ding, 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 ding. The smoke bomb bounced a few times in the room behind the iron door, landing right at Tony Stark's feet. The talented weapons manufacturer had no time to tell whether it was a grenade or a smoke grenade. In desperation, he kicked it towards the largest group of militants and shouted at the door, "What the fuck? You want to kill? Did you kill me?" Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr wall in the house. Accompanied by a long ba sound, thick white smoke quickly enveloped the entire room. At this moment, Yuri passed over Mark, who was blocking him like a ghost, and at the same time activated his spiritual power to disrupt the thug's sight and hearing. The gleaming dagger slashed across the neck of the armed man, blocking the road like lightning. Before anyone could react, he had already arrived directly in front of Tony Stark, who was being held hostage by the pseudo-Ten Rings gang leader. Let go! The gang leader obediently released his arm around Tony's neck. Suicide! The gang leader raised his pistol to his chin, and under Tony's shocked gaze, he ended his life without hesitation. What the fuck? Ignoring Tony Stark's cracked worldview, he quickly untied the ropes binding his hands, picked up the pistol on the ground and stuffed it into Tony's hands. Aim at the gang leader and use up all the bullets. Bam! 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 Tony watched in horror as he raised his right hand, beating the corpses on the ground into sieves as if he had gained consciousness. Yuri put away the mobile phone that filmed this scene and patted his shoulder with appreciation. Good, Tony. You and he are both good and obedient children. Now go and see your friends. I remember you said about him time is limited. Control returned to him again. Tony Stark pointed the empty pistol at Yuri and took a few steps back in horror. You. Me. You, this is unscientific. Yuri ignored him. A slide shovel came to the nearest corpse, picked up his left rifle, and started an inhumane massacre at the place where there were still sounds in the smoke. Mark outside the door kept looking back, the expression on his face still at the moment of the conversation with Yuri. He didn't come back to his senses until the gunshots stopped. Seeing that he was the only one left in the tunnel, he still didn't know what was going on. He didn't have time to think about why he was staying there in a daze. Mark raised his M14 and fired wildly at the ceiling the moment he entered the door. Fuck you, especially here. Where the hell are you? What the hell is this plan? The smoke dissipated little by little, and Yuri relied on his strong eyesight to easily see the furious Captain Mark. He shrunk his neck and said cautiously, I'm here, Captain. Well, no matter what, the mission was successful, right? Mark heard the sound and rushed over. Without looking at Tony, who was pointing a gun at him, he cursed angrily and raised his fists to hit Yuri, who spread his hands to express surrender. Fuck you. I'm so damn talented. It's the captain. Only I can make such a plan. I told you to run. I told you. Easily dodging all personal attacks, Yuri strolled up to Tony, who was unable to dodge, and raised his hand to snatch the empty gun from his hand. How about a deal? You deal with the angry gorilla in the back, and I'll save your friend. After finishing speaking, before Tony agreed, he pushed him to Mark, who was chasing after him with fists. This is our target person. I guess his current state cannot withstand your punch. Tony staggered into Mark's arms. He took a step back and fell to the ground. Looking at the sandbag-sized fist that was just in front of his face, he silently joked, "Not just now, for me, what? Even if I get punched in this state, I won't feel better. Fuck you, Yuri." Mark put away his fists in confusion, raised his legs and pushed Tony away from the ground, blocking his way. "Get out of the way, he's a summer job in his sophomore year, he knows shit about first aid." "No. No. No." Tony climbed up and hugged Mark's waist from behind. "This elite gentleman, I trust him more than you." Yuri ignored the quarrel between the two people. He pulled open a sheet as a barrier to isolate a private space between himself and Ethan, who had lost too much blood and fell into a coma. It doesn't matter if it's commission or not, he really wanted to save this white-bearded old man, kind-hearted, capable of scientific research, and a loner with only himself in his household registration book. What could be a better wage earner than this? Rolling his eyes, the old man's unconscious consciousness was instantly brought back to reality. He looked at Yuri, who was dressed completely differently from the Ten Rings gang, with a relieved smile on his face. "Where's Tony? Is he okay?" "He's good." With a simple reply, Yuri stretched out his right index finger and pointed it at his bloody wound. Using mental control to block pain, he simply and roughly pulled out a bullet stuck in Ethan's liver. Blood spurted out for free, but Yuri, who was worse than a veterinarian, was expressionless and didn't panic at all. He spread out his blood-stained right hand, and a ball of golden energy slowly appeared. Ethan noticed something strange and raised his head to take a look. "Oh, is it my eyesight? How about a deal? I'll save you, and you'll work for me, fair and square." The content of the deal with Tony is to save Ethan, and the specific operation is to take out the bullet in his body. Now that the first transaction has been completed unilaterally, Tony outside is obviously also working hard to complete his own transaction content. So the deal with Ethan was about the second deal, and it had nothing to do with Tony Stark. "So are you an angel or a devil? No offense, I just..." Ethan's facial expression was extremely rich at this moment. His eyes moved back and forth on Yuri's golden eyes and the golden energy ball on his hand. His eyes were full of struggle and hesitation. Okay, I agree. No one can refuse to live, especially after experiencing death." Yuri turned his palm and gently introduced the golden energy into Ethan. "Congratulations, my wage earner, you have gained a second life." Chapter 6 Beautiful Girl. You all know what to say, right? Mark's violent state has begun to cool down. He glared at Yuri, who kept smiling apologetically, stared at Ethan, who was out of danger but was unconscious, and Tony, who was carrying him, and asked. Yuri threw 2 smoke bombs, and then the group of fools got into chaos and shot at each other. "Then you two entered and rescued us one by one with finishing blows." Tony told the truth without changing his expression, then glanced at the harmless Ethan, and added, "There is no suicidal militant leader, and there is no Tony Stark who is controlled by others." Seeing Yuri's unkind eyes, he smiled and said, "There are only 2 elite mercenaries who are fearless, courageous, and resourceful, and will soon earn $1,000 million US. Mark, very good." More than a dozen helicopters rumbling slowly descended, their high-speed rotating wings raising dust all over the sky. Yuri glanced at Tony's black friend, who appeared as Colonel Rhodes of Avengers, and reminded, "It's $21 million US, Mr. Stark. You forgot to add the commission." "It doesn't matter." Tony bumped Ethan on his back, and took the lead to walk towards Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes. The only one among the soldiers who was not on guard with a gun. "Hey! Rhodes! Quickly pay the commission to these 2 elite mercenaries, not even $1 less. But not a penny more." Rhodes glanced at Yuri and Mark, who were surrounded by large corps. He had already read the information about the 2 people hiding behind them. One was a veteran mercenary who had been working all year round, and the other was a New York citizen who was seeking excitement and came to the Middle East to work during the summer vacation. Although the kid at the back is more outrageous, there is nothing wrong with either of them. He helped carry Ethan onto the stretcher, and while boarding the plane with Tony, he said, "It sounds like you didn't have a good time with them." "Damn Afghanistan!" Tony cursed and didn't answer directly, "I will never come here again." "Hand over guns, Search, question. After Yuri and Mark were subjected to this arrangement on the helicopter, they got off the helicopter and did it again at the base. Anyway, the tunnel and the house were completely burned by the fire, so the three arsonists had the final say on what happened inside. After tasting the daily breakfast of American soldiers, Yuri watched Mark dismiss his envious and jealous mercenary teammates, knocked on the plate and said, "You have made so much money, do you want to continue?" Mark took a big sip of iced Coke. "Drinking is prohibited in the base, why not? Ethan and I are in the same situation. We are alone. If we return to the city to settle down, with my bad temper, I might as well continue to be a mercenary." Woolen cloth. After finishing the iced Coke, Mark lit a cigarette skillfully. "What about you? The summer vacation is almost over. Do you want to go back and start your college life? If not..." Yuri emptied the eighth plate in front of him. Although he looked like a human, in terms of appetite, he was the perfect successor to the mutant race. Fortunately, his energy conversion efficiency is extremely high, he almost never poops, and he will continuously absorb cosmic energy. He will not feel hungry whether he eats or not, whether he eats too much or too little. Eating so much right now is just a free act of capitalism. He folded the plates and walked towards the tableware recycling place with Mark, "But I still recommend that you go back with me. After all, you are taking Tony Stark's special plane. In case there are several people inside specifically to comfort his injured children, where is the young lady who is mentally prepared?" Mark was stunned for a moment, looked at Yuri and then smiled knowingly. "You are right, I think this is a really good idea." After an hour, the two of them walked into a brand new private jet under the leadership of Tony's bodyguard Happy, who was carrying a salute. Happy's figure was still in shape, and his wide body could only be described as burly rather than fat. "I can hit him 3 times. Mark noticed Yuri's gaze and tried to stir up a topic to divert attention. After all, it was Tony Stark's private plane. You could rub it against him in the tunnel, but in real society, the Stark family is indeed difficult for ordinary people to the existence of reach. "I can hit him 9. Yuri smiled at Mark, dodged the latter's frantic fist, and followed Happy to the small parlor in the center of the plane. "Listen, Tony." Ethan's slightly weak but extremely firm voice sounded. "I am very honored to be your friend, but I will never work for your Stark Industries. I know it wasn't your fault, but the missile with Stark on it did kill my family. Let's change the subject, like you're unfinished Iron Man or something." When Tony saw the two Yuri walking over, he rolled his eyes in annoyance, and the 2 mustaches at the corners of his mouth twitched mischievously. "Oh, 2 shameless people are here." Ethan turned his head, nodded respectfully to Ethan and said, "Mr. Ambrosius." Yuri nodded, pulled the somewhat restrained Mark and sat down on the soft leather sofa. After stretching out comfortably, he continued what Ethan had just said. "What did I hear just now, Iron Man? Tony, would you mind letting me know too?" Tony picked up the wine glass and took a sip. His bandaged face, covered with a band-aid, turned to the side and did not want to look at the person speaking. "First of all, you heard wrong. Secondly, I am very concerned about it." "Really? Real? Okay." Yuri opened his backpack and calmly took out several pages of drawings with various parameters and parts drawn on them. Avoiding the drink that Tony sprayed out, he spread out the drawing and raised it. "So, are you willing to talk about this big guy now? $1,000. Too little. 2,000 million. Too little. 5,000 million. Not a penny more." Yuri looked at Tony's furious expression and handed over the drawing with a smile. "Deal." Tony grabbed the drawings, but he accidentally pulled on the wound and grinned in pain. He looked through it carefully to make sure there was nothing missing, and kept muttering "motherfucker." Mark secretly gave a thumbs up from below, and Ethan across from him also raised his eyebrows at Yuri. God sees it. On the huge private plane, Happy was probably the only one who stood on the same side as Tony. "So, Mr. Stark," Mark said his first words since entering the living room, "are there some just beautiful girl?" Seeing how uncomfortable Mark was, the helpful Yuri took the initiative to express what he wanted to say. Tony's eyes emerged from behind the drawings, filled with contempt for LSP. "No. Oh no. Oh no." Mark glanced at the white clouds flying outside the window and the sun looming in the clouds and mist. "If I go back now, is it still too late?" Chapter 7 Kicked Out. Approaching sunset. The plane landed and stopped. The hatch opened slowly. The airport, which was originally closed to motor vehicles, is now full of private cars, ambulances, armed vehicles, police cars. Tony walked at the front of the exit team without hesitation, followed by Happy who was blocking bullets and Mark who was pestering Ethan. Yuri hung himself at the end, looking at the two extended Lincolns with their doors wide open in fear. He didn't mention his summer job in the Middle East to his family. They thought that his son was traveling somewhere to walk with his sister, but now the matter was obviously exposed. The Ambrosius family operates a national chain of restaurants. Although the company is not as big as Tony Stark Industries or Green Goblin's Osborne Industries, it has provided hundreds of thousands of jobs to the United States of America. Is a real big capitalist. The Ambrosius family has a single lineage, as if they were cursed. No matter how hard the person involved, no matter whether it is scientific or unscientific means, the Ambrosius family will not be able to give birth to a second offspring. But curses are accompanied by blessings. No matter how you make this line of incense, it seems to be protected by a mysterious force and never cuts off. Yuri's grandfather, Marin Ambrosius, joined the battlefield of World War II when he was young, even if he traveled through the most dangerous places. Even in the dangerous meat grinder battle, he returned unscathed and gloriously. Yuri's father, Rob Ambrosius, is a loyal extreme sports enthusiast and is still the holder of several extreme records. Tony got off the plane, smiled, shook hands and hugged his uncle Obadiah and Rob, whom he had never interacted with before. He had already investigated Yuri's information clearly. To be honest, he didn't expect that this guy who came to the Middle East to work during the summer was actually a rich man. Yuri is a great kid. His heroic and fearless performance saved my life and gained the friendship of the Stark family. Mr. Stark is joking, Yuri must have caused you a lot of trouble, right? As an apology, your consumption at any Ambrosius restaurant in the United States will be recorded on that unfilial son. Tony's mischievous mustache jumped, and a wicked smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He looked back at Yuri who didn't know what happened, and held Rob's hand tightly. I will definitely taste it often. After the two of them looked at each other and smiled, Tony went to have a romantic relationship with Pepper. Rob and Obadiah nodded and went straight to Yuri, who was shrinking at the end of the team. Look, who is this? Yuri, tell me, that son of a bitch tour group is going to take stupid tourists to experience the fucking life in the Middle East. This is school social work. Rob ignored Yuri's listen to my quibbles expression with a straight face, and waved his hand for two bodyguards to escort him into the back seat. With a different expression, he smiled and said to Mark and Ethan, who were living alone and dependent on each other, you two are Yuri's friends. Get in the car at the back. I have already arranged a place for you. After getting into the car and rolling down the window, Rob waved goodbye to Tony and his group who were not far away. He behaved in a gentlemanly and natural manner, showing off his capitalist style. That is, of course, if you ignore Yuri's struggles and complaints in the back seat. The windows are raised, completely isolating the cabin from the outside world. Rob pressed a button, and the seats in the back slowly changed their positions amid a mechanical twisting sound, forming a small circular conference room. He took a small black suitcase from the bodyguard and opened it to Yuri on the conference table. Lying quietly inside was a small note, 2 keys, a bank card and a small wad of cash. Since you want freedom, then I will give you freedom. Rob clicked 2 keys. This property is near Hell's Kitchen. It's not very big, but it's big enough for you. There's a motorcycle in the parking garage inside. I remember you like to ride this one the most. Before Yuri could open his mouth, he continued, there are $50 in the bank card. I don't care how much you earn or lose in the Middle East. Anyway, I won't give you another penny from now on. The elongated Lincoln stopped steadily at the airport gate. Rob took out the note and put it into Yuri's hand. Tapped the banknotes in the box and pressed the button again. As the seat slowly recovered, Rob said without looking back, the real estate address and bank card password are written on the note. This wad of cash is for you to take a taxi. The bodyguard on the passenger seat opened the door next to Yuri, and the 2 bodyguards escorting him thrust the box into his hand and pushed it out. Bang! The car started, and the window slowly fell down again. Rob made a phone call gesture in his ear, don't call your mother, we have changed a new number. Yuri lowered his head and looked at the suitcase he was carrying. Rob's voice continued to be heard from the distant Lincoln, you know, Yuri, this is a family rule. You were kicked out of the house. The vehicle following the extended Lincoln passed Yuri at a steady speed, and the lowered windows revealed the 2 old faces of Mark and Ethan gloating, goodbye, Yuri. I wish you good luck. Motherfucker. Yuri held the box in his left hand and held the bow that was also thrown down with his right hand, and hailed a taxi waiting for the guests. Although this wave of evicted from home is a bit sloppy, he really has nothing to complain about. Just like Rob said, it's just family rules. Anyway, the Ambrosius family is a single generation, and sooner or later he will return to inherit the family business. But being kicked out of the house in public is really a bit embarrassing. If Tony sees this, the cautious guy will take photos and publicize it. Is this okay? This is not good. Better to go first. He got in the car and gave the driver his address. The yellow taxi started steadily and took him to his new address. Near Hell's Kitchen, Cheap Daddy seems to have a strong opinion on me. The black driver was not talkative, but his driving skills were very good. After arriving at the destination, Yuri repeatedly confirmed whether it matched the address on the note. After receiving a positive answer, he paid and got off the car. What you see in front of you is a row of 3-story buildings, with each floor covering an area of about 404 square meters, adding up to 1,000 square meters. The house number given by Dad is, if I am not mistaken, his neighbors are a cafe and a bookstore respectively. Hey! Young man! The old man who was about to close the door of the bookstore waved his hand and asked enthusiastically, do you need any help? Yuri was quite satisfied with the condition of the house. Hearing this, he took out the key from his suitcase and waved it at the old man. I don't have it now, but when I finish packing the house, I may need you to come to my housewarming party. Oh! The old man stood up from his chair and walked steadily to Yuri, who was trying to open the door. He looked up and down at the young man who came in light clothes and asked curiously, so, young man, do you mind telling me what you plan to do here? Do you do any business? Crack! Yuri opened the heavy padlock and untied a long iron chain wrapped around the door. He looked back and saw that every 3-story building on the long street had a variety of shops. I haven't thought about it yet, old man. Yuri opened the door and threw the next long chain into the empty room. Maybe the bookstore is a good idea. The old man hummed softly. After seeing the evil smile on Yuri's face, he smiled and pointed his finger at him and said, you are such a bad boy. Steal business with the old man. Chapter 8 Tony, creating a file. Yuri. After sending the old man away from the bookstore, Yuri carried the gift into the house. The first floor was empty, and Rob obviously wanted him to start some business and practice his skills. The second floor had been renovated, and the square meter room was filled with the fitness equipment that Yuri and he were kicked out of the house. The third floor was blocked by a wall. Divided into 2 spaces, the one by the window is obviously Yuri's bedroom, because it is full of his personal belongings. Refracted down to the first floor, Yuri shook his head while carrying a chain that weighed at least kilograms. He activated Fastos's shaping and assembly abilities, and in a few seconds, the chain turned into a mechanical combination lock with a simple style and mysterious patterns on the outside. This should be considered a handicraft, right? Yuri put the door lock on the fence door, and activated his ability to merge the two into one. Unfortunately, he did not have the ability to transform matter, otherwise the iron door would turn into a vibranium door in minutes, which would be completely indestructible and unbreakable. Set password, 666404666. Yuri glanced at a big white leg passing by on the street through the gap in the fence. It was getting dark. Except for a few 3-story buildings above his shop, the busy street during the day was now quiet, with only a few. A naughty child refused to go home while playing street ball. Exhaling in front of the empty first floor, he had already thought about the business he wanted to do, buy handicrafts. I just have to deal with my dad. It doesn't matter whether this business without capital makes money or not. It can't lose money anyway, right? Returning to the second floor, he turned on the power switch and plugged in the fitness equipment that needed electricity one by one. Mutants only know about killing and evolution in their minds, and they never have an intuitive understanding of their own ability level. But Yuri is a human being now. If he doesn't even know the role and upper limit of his own abilities, does he still deserve to be a human being? The long lever was hung with counterweights by Yuri. After a little calculation, it was 22 kilograms, which is 1011 kilograms or 1.011 tons. Holding the pole with both hands, Yuri easily lifted this guy who could easily crush someone to death. After weighing his feelings, he directly let go of one hand and raised it with another hand. Lifting it twice easily, Yuri gently placed the barbell on the ground. It was strange that the existing equipment was not enough to test his current strength. With the ability to launch a major transformation, he fumbled through all the fitness equipment in the huge gym. Half an hour later, the sky outside the window was completely dark, and Yuri finally completed the transformation. All the original various fitness equipment disappeared, replaced by only a weight machine to test strength, a treadmill to test speed, a dynamometer to test attack power, and a lot of miscellaneous parts. Turning on the power supply of the lifting machine, Yuri tightly grasped an insulating rod on it. This thing is essentially an electromagnet. The greater the current, the greater the gravitational force between the two iron ingots. 2 tons, 3 tons, 4 tons, 5 tons, 6 tons, 7 tons, 8. No matter how hard Yuri tried, he could not break through the 8-ton limit. He slowly reduced his strength and put down the insulating rod. This power was pretty good. Although it was not as strong as the Hulk or Spider-Man, it was enough to take on the Winter Soldier and Black Widow. Captain America? That's a bug. Turning on the treadmill, Yuri increased his speed little by little after standing firm, 1m/s, 3m/s, 5m/s, 10m/s, 20m/s, 40m/s. Yuri could no longer see the specific rules of his legs on the track, and a wisp of smoke slowly floated from the bottom of a pair of shoes marked Nike. His master didn't care about these details at all, he only thought about accelerating and accelerating again. 70m/s. 81m/s. The rubber tracks hummed unbearably, and Yuri gradually slowed down. 81m/s. 291.6 km per hour. He can run for a whole day at this speed. Not bad. Yuri took off his shoes. The bottoms of them had melted and deformed, exuding an unpleasant smell. Opening the window in disgust, the shoes were accurately thrown into the trash can facing the street. A few wild cats looking for food were startled by the big shoe soles passing by them. They were about to curse, but they met a pair of golden eyes. Meow. As if they saw something scary, these little guys fled in all directions. They may have the same nightmare tonight. Yuri closed the window and patted the treadmill on the verge of being scrapped, causing it to be completely scrapped and broken down into parts. Then he turned on the dynamometer and was eager to test the black rubber on it. The principle of the dynamometer is the same as that of the weightlifting machine. It is essentially an electromagnet. However, the dynamometer brings the two electromagnets closer together, while the weightlifter separates the two electromagnets. Oh! A dull impact sounded, and a terrifying number was reported on the display of the force measuring instrument, 12.6 tons. Yuri nodded. He was just trying it out just now, now he has to get serious. Bang! The dynamometer shakily reported the number, 16.9 tons. I shook my hand, but the rubber pad was still too thin. Bang! 16.5 tons. Yuri nodded with satisfaction. The right arm weighs 17 tons, the left arm weighs 16.5 tons. With such destructive power, what building can't he demolish? Put your fists in and change your legs. Bang! The dynamometer made an unpleasant squeaking sound, and its reinforced bracket was overwhelmed. As Yuri continued to reinforce, he looked at the number above, 20.1 tons. Bang! 19.2 tons. Yuri closed his legs with satisfaction and looked at the cracked floor on the second floor with a headache. It seemed that he needed to learn from Fastos and transform his 3-story building into a fortress. It doesn't matter if there are thieves or robbers, he is mainly worried that this 3-story building that he just bought will be destroyed by him. Late at night, Yuri lay on the bed sleeping soundly. Tony was lying on the bed tossing and turning. He had just replaced the electromagnet on his chest, and he still couldn't get used to the strange feeling. The shot Ethan took definitely broke his spleen. But why did the medical report show only skin trauma and excessive blood loss? Half asleep and half awake, he seemed to be back in that terrifying cave again. The man in front of him with his back turned to him calmly ordered, "Tony, kill yourself." He watched in horror as he raised his pistol and pulled the trigger. The second before his vision went dark, the man slowly turned around, revealing Yuri's handsome face and those unscientific pure white eyes. No! Yuri! The dream was shattered. Tony woke up screaming, the light in the bedroom gave off a reassuring light, and Jarvis's steady voice sounded from all directions, "What's wrong, sir? Do you need me to call Mr. Yuri for you?" "No." Tony quickly rolled out of bed, "Jarvis, don't mention this name in front of me, at least not tonight." "Well, as you bid, sir." Jarvis was doing his best, and paused for a moment. When he saw Tony getting dressed and walking out of the bedroom, he asked as usual, what do you want to do now, sir? Do you want me to call you for bedtime service? Is this who I am to you, Jarvis? Tony walked into the laboratory angrily, and all the lights were turned on in sequence. The spacious room exuded a strong atmosphere of science and technology. Create a file and name it Yuri Ambrosius. As you can see, Jarvis, I just had a nightmare. But I can't guarantee that it will only be a dream. Chapter 9 Unless I Die. Yuri was woken up by a phone call from the decoration company, and the door was opened at a.m., but he slept until a.m. We've been waiting here for half an hour. Does that mean you're half an hour late? The two parties looked at each other and unanimously chose to skip the topic of who is late. He helped carry the ordered shelves and sofas and coffee tables into the house, and directed these fat black men to place them in the correct positions. It is indeed difficult for black people to find jobs in the United States. If they are smuggled over from Mexico, it will be even more difficult. White people basically do not do hard work like porters, which requires effort. After swiping the card to pay the balance, the black uncles got into the truck and walked away with a sneak sound. Yuri said hello to the old man who was sunbathing in the bookstore next door, and heard the old man ask enthusiastically, "Hey! Young man, have you decided on a business? Don't really compete with an old man like me for business. Don't worry, old sir." Yuri walked up to the old man and pointed to the shelves in the glass display window. "I plan to open a handicraft store and sell some gadgets I made myself." The old man glanced at Yuri's three-story building and was quite dissatisfied that the other party had blocked the sunlight shining on his face. "Young man, you'd better go back and clean up the house. It's better to do a time-wasting task like sunbathing. Let the old man do it." Yuri turned around and extended his hand to the old man. "It's a great honor to be your neighbor. Rogers." The old man took Yuri's hand and shook it happily. "The noise you made last night was quite big. It disturbed me so much that I almost fell asleep." Yuri expressed his apology again and again, and only after he was absolutely sure that such a thing would never happen again, did the old man grumble and express his forgiveness. After inviting the grey-haired old man to have breakfast at the cafe next door, Yuri returned to his three-story building. There are more pedestrians on the street now. The honking of bicycles, motorcycles, and cars are mixed with the voices of passers-by. All kinds of noises are like a pervasive flood passing through the defense line of the glass door. "Soundproof. Must be soundproofed." I called Mark casually. But the person who answered the phone was a woman with a soft voice. This unlucky kid was just like the old man next door. He didn't sleep last night, but the old man received the noise, and Mark made the noise. "Did you find a place to sleep last night?" Mark opened his mouth to mock mercilessly. "Found it, on your mother's bed." After a few waffling words, Yuri quickly changed the topic to the right track. "Help me get some materials, of any type and quantity, and send them to my new home tonight." Mark took the pen handed over by the woman and wrote the address Yuri said on her butt. "Okay, no problem. Do you want anything else besides these? I have all the guns and ammunition you need. I can also get you rocket launchers and grenades. If you want, you can become a gun shop owner." "No. No. No." Yuri shook his index finger crazily over the phone. "What a bullshit gun shop owner. I am a college student from MIT." Only after a dog ate his brain did he choose to be a gun shop owner. After emphasizing that Mark should not bring some weird things, Yuri hung up the phone decisively, waved his hand to disassemble several shelves into parts, and controlled them to be embedded in the wall at the appropriate position. Fastos's fortress hut uses the principle of energy shield. This thing cannot be made with his current level of ability, but it is still easy to install some vibration isolation devices. The creations of the Eternals will be attached with magical patterns, which allows them to absorb free energy independently to maintain normal function even if they are out of the control of their creators. After a slight tremor, the entire first floor fell into deathly silence. Except for Yuri's own breathing, no other sound could be heard. After several fine adjustments, the sound reached the most comfortable decibel level. Yuri clapped his hands with satisfaction, smiled and said, "Nice. So, this is a device that can theoretically resist mind control, mind interference, etc., right?" Tony picked up a palm-sized chip from the experimental bench with his fingers. After squinting at the shadowless lamp on the ceiling, he handed it to the mechanical arms iode on the side with satisfaction. "Gee whiz, design a suitable hat for it. After the show in the evening, I will take Yuri, which it will hate, to see if this cute little guy is as useful as expected. Observe, sir. In less than a second, Jarvis projected a dozen hat panoramas of different shapes into the air in front of Tony. Sir, I don't recommend that you go there in person. After probability calculation, the safest way is it was you who sent someone to conduct the experiment. Your suggestion is correct, but I don't accept it. Tony quickly selected a gentleman's hat that was retro in style but still looked cool. He waved his hand and shattered the projection in front of him. That's it. Let me see what my little brother Yuri can do without his superpowers. What can you do? Drop. The door was opened, and Obeiday walked in with a thick, black Cuban cigar between his arms. The villain had genuine concern on his face. He walked a few steps quickly, hugged Tony and asked with concern, "Oh my good nephew, I heard that you didn't sleep all night last night? Let me guess, you must have invented some new weapon, right? Haha, good morning." Tony waved his hand to close the experimental table and changed the subject while laughing. "Believe me. I spent the whole night brewing, and tonight's press conference will definitely bring you a big surprise." Obeiday laughed exaggeratedly and took the burger handed by the bodyguard with his cigar in his hand. "Thank you so much, Tony. I knew you hadn't eaten yet, so I bought you your favorite cheeseburger. Come and taste it." Tony took it with a smile and got rid of Obeiday's embrace. He opened the package and took a big bite, chewed it a few times and said vaguely, "Uncle Obeiday, you haven't really understood me after all these years. My favorite thing to eat is the cheeseburger bought from the food truck downstairs. Not a cheeseburger you get from a fast food restaurant." "Oh." Obeiday's steps paused, and he turned his head to look at the profile of Tony, who was one step ahead, as if he wanted to see something new from this face that he had seen for more than 20 years. "People change, Tony. Perhaps when did you suddenly fall in love with cheeseburgers from fast food restaurants?" Tony turned to face Obeiday and walked backwards. "It's impossible. There's only one way this could happen: if all the cheeseburger food trucks in the world don't disappear. That means I'm dead." Chapter 10. Amid the deafening applause and the endless sound of shutters, Tony Stark, the heir to Stark Industries, synonymous with genius, and the biggest playboy in the United States, walked towards the podium. He skillfully answered various difficult or joking questions from reporters, and his witty answers attracted bursts of laughter. 10 minutes later, he pressed his hands to indicate silence. After making sure that all the cameras were pointed at him and all the cameramen pressed their fingers on the shutter, he first looked at Pepper, and then at Obeiday, who was holding a cigar and smiling. Just when the latter thought that this fat chicken was going to lay another golden egg, Tony took a deep breath and said firmly to the reporter, "I witnessed the young soldier being killed with my own eyes. He died in a place I wanted to protect under their weapons." Obadiah's expression changed. "The reporters are excited. I also found that I was becoming part of this irresponsible world. I woke up and realized that I could contribute more to the world besides making weapons. So, I decided." Obeiday strode towards the podium, but was stopped by Tony's loyal bodyguard, Happy. The sound of clicking cameras in the venue became one piece, and everyone was waiting for the next sentence of the people on the podium. Earth-shattering words. "I have decided to close the Stark Industries weapons division, effective immediately. Mr. Stark. Can I ask?" The whole place was boiling. Obeiday, who was stopped by Happy, looked at his eldest nephew who was still talking bitterly on the stage, threw away the cigarette in his hand, and left the press conference without saying a word. "This surprise is so big. So, do you think this is true, Yuri?" Mark looked up at the TV that had just been installed, and used a fork to remove a steak from the boiling hot pot and put it on his plate. In fact, he was strongly opposed to this kind of Chinese dinner at first, but after Yuri's strong recommendation and the vivid description of the old man in the bookstore, he still tentatively made it. "It's so fragrant." After Stark finished saying close the Stark Industries weapons department, Yuri held the computer for a while. And he was studying other traversers in his memory. At this great time, he used all the funds to madly buy Stark Industries stocks. After hearing Mark's question, he said without raising his head, "Who cares if it's true or not? Anyway, there will be many people jumping from the roof tonight, and there will also be many reporters writing hard all night." Mark cut open the steak soaked in the base soup with a knife, picked up a piece and stuffed it into his mouth. As he enjoyed his dinner, he expressed his opinion vaguely, "I think it might be true. You know, there is probably only one rich second generation like you on the planet who took the initiative to work in the Middle East for summer vacation. Tony Stark is just a playboy. After experiencing life and death in Afghanistan, he must have changed something. Perhaps, this is the change he made. Yuri nodded perfunctorily, and the old man only focused on stuffing things into his mouth. The two of them were busy with their own business, not caring about what Mark, who was full of knowledge, just said. Fuck. Mark cleared the meat on the plate and was about to denounce the two rude guys when he heard the doorbell being pressed. Yuri and the old man raised their heads together. Go and open the door. Mark greeted their immediate family members one by one, and angrily went downstairs with a meat-cutting knife in his hand. This shop is closed. Are you so blind that you still come here to knock on, Tony Stark? Tony was wearing a decent little suit and a retro and cool gentleman's hat on his head. He held a ceremonial staff with his two hands crossed on the front. He smiled and bowed slightly to Mark, who smelled like hot pot. So, you're not going to let me in? Oh, sorry. Mark put away the knife without leaving a trace, opened the door and let Tony in. Happy, who was blocking Opadri on the TV just now, followed closely behind. After taking a few strong sniffs on the first floor, he asked a question that Tony also wanted to know. What good food are you eating? Fire boiler. Hot pot. Tony's eyebrows raised. What the hell is this? Can it be eaten? Mark closed the door and led the three of them to the restaurant on the second floor. Hey! Yuri. As soon as Tony entered the door, he warmly greeted Yuri, who had just finished his work. Then he took out two sets of cutlery from the cupboard, handed one to Happy, and unceremoniously squeezed in next to Yuri and the old man. This little guy is so rude, far worse than you, Yuri. Old man Rogers moved his stool far away from Tony in disgust and complained outright about the conduct of this famous American playboy. Yuri, who was innocently lying at gunpoint, raised his head in confusion. He once worked a summer job in the Middle East against an enemy of 10,000 and stubbornly retorted, "Don't compare me with him, I'm not bad." The host on the TV was explaining Tony's operation in an exaggerated tone, while the client was sitting at the steaming table, imitating Mark, using a fork to pick up a piece of mutton that Yuri had put in and put it into his mouth. After chewing a few times, his doubtful face suddenly lit up with surprise. He pointed at the copper pot that looked like the evil wizard's potion bottle in a children's fairy tale, and nodded while gesturing with his thumb. "It smells so good. Of 3 rounds of wine, 5 flavors of food." Yuri clinked glasses with Tony, who was sweating profusely, and asked, "So what are you doing here?" "To avoid the cover girls vying to jump on your bed, and to miss the deep friendship we established in the Middle East." "To hell with great friendships." Tony, who was a little drunk, patted the gentleman's hat that he refused to take off even though he was sweating profusely. He stood up with half a glass of wine and let out a long burp while holding on to the sofa. "Come on, Yuri. Use your damn hypnosis on me. I, Tony Stark, am fearless." Hearing this, Happy and Mark looked at each other. The former had no idea what his boss was talking about, while the latter vaguely understood the truth. As for the old man? This old man with the same name as Captain America obviously didn't have a super hangover ability. He fell asleep on the table after 2 bottles of brandy. Mark. Happy. Yuri and Tony looked at each other and said the next sentence in no particular order, "Please carry this old man back to his bookstore." Happy and Mark looked at each other. These two looked like they had rehearsed, and those who didn't know thought they were filming here. "Come on, Happy, give me a hand." Mark held the old man's arm, and Happy lifted the old man's legs. The two guys, who had not received formal medical education, moved the old man out of the restaurant in the same manner as they would move a dead body on the battlefield. When Tony saw the two of them disappear, the smell of alcohol on his body seemed to have faded a bit. He drank all the wine in his glass, stood upright with his ceremonial staff, and stared at Yuri, who was still sitting at the dining table eating. "You know what, Tony?" Yuri picked up the last piece of meat from the copper pot and stuffed it into his mouth. After chewing it, he swallowed it along with the wine. "I really want to be friends with you, but friends can't touch each other. So, how about a deal?" Chapter 11. The storm is rising. Tony raised his eyebrows and hit the ground with his ceremonial staff. "Nothing can stop you from using that damn hypnosis on me today. Listen to me first." Yuri lay on the sofa, crossed his legs and said leisurely, "I know you will definitely come to my door, so you might as well set a rule from now on. The first time you asked me to test your anti-Yuri weapons or anti-Yuri equipment, you wanted to give me $100 million US. The second time it was $200 million, the third time $400 million, and so on. And so on. Auntie Yuri is a great name. Tony obviously only listened to the previous words. What is money but no money? Is there anyone richer than him on earth? I have expropriated, do I need copyright fees? Yuri spread his hands indifferently. Anyway, you will come up with this name later, it's just Hulkbuster, Anti-Thanos, and the like. Whoever resists will be beaten. Be lucky. When I get back, I will put 300 million into your account, 100 million for your sales fee, and the rest is the copyright fee. Yuri raised his eyebrows. I thought you were going to buy me 2 chances to take action. Tony shook his hair confidently and said sarcastically to his opponent on the sofa in an arrogant tone, if I win you, once is forever. Yuri didn't refute, and a pair of bright golden pupils lit up slightly. Tony's gentleman's hat, which was sweating profusely and refused to be taken off, floated up out of thin air, revealing his wet hair and frightened face. What the hell is this damn ability? Psychic control. Yuri didn't explain. He just used Mark's knife to hold up the hat and let it spin gently in his hand. If you continue, the amount that will be credited to my account should be 500 million. Tony took a deep breath and approached Yuri in small steps. Okay, money is no problem, but I want to get my hat back, and then let you use the one you did to me in the cave. You know, roll your eyes. Yuri smiled brightly, stood up, and returned the hat to Tony harmlessly. The gadget inside is indeed very good, but putting it in the hat is too stupid. Let me give you a suggestion, it's welded to the skull. I will think about it. Thinking of the iron armor that had been built but not assembled in the cave, Tony nodded the slutty hat on his head. He bent down like a matador and put the hat into Yuri's eyes. Come on, Yuri. A flash of pure white climbed up to the dazzling golden eyes, and soon replaced them all. Yuri activated his powers and did feel a slight resistance when trying to enter Tony's brain. But the resistance was too small, and he had to carefully control his strength to prevent the enemy from being defeated too quickly and causing greater vigilance. You must win. But every time, I have to give him the illusion that I tried my best to win you. Hey! Just playing. The bulging veins, the big beads of sweat, the clenched fists and the powerful muscles. Yuri tried hard to show off all the features he could think of that could show that he was exerting himself. After more than 10 seconds, he couldn't pretend anymore and suddenly lifted his disguise and fell on the sofa with a heavy breath. Tony, who was not far away, was pouring wine from a glass with an expressionless face, and respectfully handed a full glass of vodka to Yuri's half-lifted hand. After taking a sip of wine, Yuri said to Tony, who was standing beside him with his hands tied, You lost, do you admit it? Mother fuck. Admit it. Foo. Admit it. Admit. Controlling Tony, he walked to the sofa farthest away from him and sat down. Yuri's pure white eyes gradually returned to golden color, and Tony also regained control of his body. Motherfucker. Fuck you mother. The furious Tony jumped up from the sofa, and sent out the greeting that he said but didn't fully say to Yuri. By chance, Mark and Happy, who had returned from moving the corpse, heard Tony's furious roar. Happy, who was eager to protect his master, looked at each other and climbed up the stairs with a thump. Boss. Boss. What happened, boss? Yuri watched helplessly as Tony returned to being a gentleman from his rage. He raised his glass and smiled at the flustered Happy. Tony is learning to rap. You can hear how passionate he is when he sings. Let's go. Tony didn't even look at the steps Yuri handed him. He took off his gentleman's hat and threw it to Yuri, banging the ceremonial staff loudly as he walked. Happy looked at Yuri with a distressed look on his face. In this situation, can we still sit and eat together in the future? Yuri followed Tony downstairs, and when passing by Mark, he put the gentleman's hat that Tony threw over on Mark's head. He glanced at Tony, and deliberately explained in a loud voice, This is my trophy today. I gave it to you, my dear captain. Happy. Outside the glass door, Tony called out to his bodyguard, Drive. I'm coming. Happy hurriedly ran down the stairs again. After the car started, he politely lowered the window to say goodbye to his boss. Come and play often, Happy. Yuri bid farewell to the guests warmly and pulled Mark, who was yawning and smelling of alcohol, to go back to the hotel. Finish moving your things before leaving. Crack. A batter used a cigar cutter to cut a brand new cigar. After toasting it for more than 10 seconds, he took the unburned end and took a puff. Fragrant smoke sprayed out from his slightly open mouth. They gathered and swirled, and soon gathered into the swirling smoke that filled the entire office. Jingle bell. He patted her head under the table to signal her to stay quiet. Obeiday answered the phone calmly, and a deep voice came from inside, "Boss, we found some unusual things in the cave. The pictures have been sent to your mailbox, but the drawings were destroyed by the fire." Clicking on the mailbox, Obeiday easily imagined a mechanical jacket full of firepower based on the pictures, and whoever wore it would be invincible on the battlefield. "Send them back to me one by one. Remember, these things are more important than your life." Beep. The phone hangs up. Obeiday made a few operations on his touch-sensitive mobile phone and quickly found the contact information of the Minister of Engineering. "Secretly establish Area 16 under the arc reactor. I want the best engineers. I will send you the stuff right away. Give me the best advice. Build a prototype quickly." Beep. Hang up the phone. "Oh my dear Tony." The woman secretly rolled her eyes again. "I can't believe you are still such a pervert." Chapter 12. Opening the business, talking to Tony. Searching the internet for various strange models, rubbing steel with my hands at night while exercising my abilities, wandering the streets during the day looking for the New York sanctuary. The peaceful days passed quickly. Mark left without saying goodbye on the third day after eating hot pot. When Yuri called him for another meal, he was told that people were already playing real-person chicken on a certain battlefield. Today is January 2010, 7. The day when Mr. Yuri Ambrosius's ancestral handicraft shop officially opened. He originally named the shop Ancient Handicraft Shop. Maybe he didn't understand what he meant, or maybe the other party had a brain problem. He sent it to Yuri for acceptance the day before the opening, but both of them were stunned. At the instigation of Old Rogers, who was not too fussy about the excitement, Yuri received a small compensation from the producer, and then he hung the sign Ancestral Handicraft Shop on the lintel in a grand manner. Crackling! Crackling! At 10 o'clock in the morning, the street was full of people who had time to go out to spend. There was a line of luxury cars parked next to this small shop with a particularly domineering name, carrying the opening gifts from his father who thought he was upright. Ethan and the old man Rogers stood not far away, supporting each other, watching almost all the people attracted by the sound of firecrackers pointing at Yuri's shop. "What the hell is this name? Does the shop owner not want to do business? Honey, I bet the sign will be taken off this store soon. I swore to my ancestors that I would never buy anything there even to death." Clap. The door lock was unlocked, and Yuri came out from the small shop. Several burly bodyguards in black greeted him and carefully moved the gifts in the luxury car into the store door one by one. One of the leaders walked into Yuri and introduced, "Master, after the boss heard about the small shop you opened, he specially bought these treasures from the auction for you: Van Gogh's oil paintings, Chinese porcelain, Japanese ukiyo-e." "Okay." Yuri waved his hand to shut him up, and waved to Ethan, who was standing chatting with old man Rogers, to come over. He patted the bodyguard on the shoulder and pushed Ethan in front of him. "Tell him if you have anything. Also, convey your gratitude for me." The head of the bodyguard shrugged at Ethan, who smiled slightly. "He is the boss, isn't he?" Yuri quickly returned to the third floor. He had more important things to do than opening the store. After several days of continuous use, the ability obtained from Fastos was approaching the next stage, and the mysterious rune with unknown effect was on his flickering in the brain. One by one unconstrained but practical technological inspirations appeared and disappeared quickly. Parts, gears, bearings, steam, magic. A small metal figure the size of a finger was assembled from scratch. Under the control of the creator's mind, it flexibly performed a series of actions such as walking, running, jumping, and rolling on the table, with streaks of white hair as thick as a hair. Steam spurts out from various joints from time to time, and mysterious runes flicker on and off, using magic to draw moisture from the air to replenish the consumption of the metal villain. Cyberpunk. Yuri patted his head and gradually returned to normal, staring at the metal villain with a strange light shining in his bright golden eyes. "If you want to join the magnificent future of the Marvel world, a certain combat power level is necessary." Although he possesses extraordinary abilities, compared with 3 or 4 years later, this stage is not the best time to expose himself. Therefore, he may be able to use this metal villain to create an image of a scientific research genius like Tony. Crack. Tony raised his eyebrows as he watched Yuri quickly withdraw his hands under the table, and said teasingly, "Although it's not polite for me to come in without permission, but, you are not browsing some colored website's bar." Yuri was about to get angry, but found that if he wanted to set himself up as a scientific genius, he still needed to make some small cooperation with the playboy in front of him. You know. When Tony saw that Yuri was just looking at him, he naturally continued the topic, I know a lot of beautiful girls. If you really need it, I don't think they would mind talking to you. To shut up. Yuri grabbed an A4 piece of paper on the table, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it at Tony. After the other person sat down on the sofa, he pointed at Tony's 2-issue Blu-ray chest and asked, How is your steel jacket doing? What? Tony Stark, who was pouring wine by himself, suddenly lost his composure. He pretended to continue pouring wine as if nothing had happened. In fact, he was very nervous inside. What steel jacket? I don't know what you are talking about. Yuri shrugged, I want to say that if you don't succeed, you might as well come here tonight to see me. Tony, who had just poured the drink into his mouth, almost spit it out when he heard this. He put the wine glass on the table and crossed his hands in a serious manner, You are plagiarizing and stealing. I can ask a lawyer. I'm suing you, Yuri. Haha. Yuri was non-committal. There are many cars in this world, such as Mercedes, BMW, Ford. Your drawing just gave me a little inspiration. If this is considered plagiarism, it is too unreasonable. Besides, that's not what I want to talk to you about. Tony watched him talk and mentally analyzed the possibility of Yuri creating the armor. When he heard the last sentence, he shook his mustache and asked calmly, So, what do you really want to talk to me about? What? Please remind me in advance, I am not interested in men. I don't know who stares at Spider-Man every day, or who always puts his eyes on Captain America's butt. Yuri complained secretly and knocked on the table to bring the topic back on track. Tony, you are not a naive fool. You don't think that because you created it, it must belong to you, right? Tony immediately understood what Yuri meant. His face was solemn, but he still said stubbornly, What, Yuri? What did I create? Yuri chuckled, Satellites in the sky will find you, radars on the ground will track you, members of Congress will interrogate you, and high-level military officials will threaten you, because they are not fools, they know very well that a weapon is invulnerable, but how precious is a combat unit that can go to heaven and earth? With your steel jacket, everyone can be Captain America. Tony picked up the wine glass again, leaned heavily on the soft sofa, and took a long sip of wine in silence. He understood that everything Yuri described would happen, and he even knew that those people could do much more than that. A glass of wine. The wine was quickly finished. He held the empty glass and looked at the uneven outer wall of the glass reflecting the beautiful light and asked casually, So, what can you do? Is it my book that leaves you speechless? Chapter 13 Hell's Kitchen. Ethan saw Tony walking out with a frown on his face. He didn't know what exactly the boss and Tony talked about upstairs, but it was always something that made the latter unhappy. To be honest, he was very satisfied with his current job. Although Tony was the only customer in the whole day, it was a good time for him who was earning a dead salary. Just as he was thinking this, he saw his boss walking in with a thick stack of documents. Hey, Ethan. Yuri smiled kindly and said, Your job has come. Ethan took the drawing, flipped through a few pages, frowned and asked uncertainly, Boss, this seems to be. Yuri was admiring the treasures that his cheap dad had taken from the auction. Hearing this, he said without looking back, In fact, if you can read everything in your hand, there won't be any more. Question. What you saw is fundamentally different from the ugly monster Tony discovered in the cave. What I need you to do is to equip it with a set of sharp fangs based on its performance. A few minutes later, after looking at all the treasures, Yuri shook his head. He could not appreciate the artistic styles of Europe and the United States. In comparison, he preferred the ukiyo-e from a country where sharpshooters were always present. How about Ethan? He turned back to Ethan, who was still looking at the drawings. This shouldn't be a problem for you. Ethan looked up from the drawing and asked with great suspicion, So? Magic really exists in this world? Yuri nodded, and a ball of light that was very familiar to Ethan slowly appeared in the palm of his empty right hand. After shooting it into Ethan's body, who was in the process of reshaping his world view, he smiled and asked, How else would I save you? Where are you coming back? The warm current surging in his body completely dispelled Ethan's doubts. He organized all the drawings on the table and returned them to Yuri. He raised the glasses on the bridge of his nose and said, I have written down the rough parameters. The plan is dark. It could be done before, but the actual thing is not something I can handle. Yuri nodded, and he returned to the second floor, ready to start preparing for tonight's meeting with Tony. The second floor has been completely transformed into his raw material warehouse, where common metals such as iron, copper, and nickel are piled, as well as a small box of precious metals such as gold and silver. After closing the stair door that was the only one leading upstairs except for the window, Yuri walked among the metals and found all the materials he needed in a flash of thought. Hard gold and stone swirled around him like water. This was a newly acquired characteristic after his ability evolved. He could process and control the required materials within a small area without physical contact. How small is a small range? It's only about 1 meter away. Using copper and iron as the main material, with 1 foot on the floor and the ceiling above his head, the metal giant was pieced together bit by bit from bottom to top. Under the influence of superpowers, there is no gap in the connection between the metals, except for the material. Apart from the uneven colors caused by different colors, the entire fuselage looks like it is made from nature. Call. Yuri looked at the time, and it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon before he knew it. He opened the door and went downstairs, and found that Ethan was also concentrating on his work. There were far fewer people on the street. Yuri knocked on Ethan's table. It's already 2 o'clock. Are you hungry? Oh. Ethan was startled. He lifted his glasses that slid down to his nose and asked doubtfully, "Boss, what did you say?" Yuri pointed to the clock on the wall. "I asked you if you are hungry." Ethan touched his stomach and realized that he had not eaten for nearly 7 hours. He simply finished the work at hand, locked all the notes in the cabinet and walked out. "So, boss, do you want to treat me?" "You said so, what else can I do?" Yuri rolled his eyes at him and took the lead in opening the store door and walking out. "Do you have anything you want to eat? If not, then we will find a buffet restaurant with a large portion." Ethan locked the door and said, "No, boss. The cafeteria is just fine." The two of them searched along the street and found that all the restaurants in this area had temporarily closed signs. After walking around for a while, they finally found a Western restaurant open on the street. "That's it, boss, I can't walk anymore." Ethan looked at the drug addicts everywhere on the street, and belatedly realized that he had entered Hell's Kitchen. He pushed open the glass door of this Western restaurant, and the smell of blood coming from the shop made him feel. He couldn't help but frown. A trail of blood stretched along the floor to the kitchen. And waiters in store uniforms were cleaning the floor with mops. "Gentlemen, what would you like to order?" Ethan already regretted stepping into this Western restaurant. He was not stupid, and of course he knew what the blood stain meant. But Yuri was just a little disgusted. He took the menu from the waiter, glanced at it and ordered 30 steaks and a standard set menu, plus some wine and fruit. He returned the menu to the waiter, but he did not let go immediately. His eyes glanced at the blood on the floor, and he reminded lightly, "Make sure the tableware is hygienic, and don't mistake the fake for the real thing." The waiter smiled gently, held the menu in his arms and said, "Don't worry, this is a different business." Seeing him walking away, Ethan approached Yuri and complained, "I must eat on time next time. This feels terrible." Yuri was non-committal. He was thinking about whether to reach a food delivery agreement with the cafe next door. After all, if no one reminded, once he and Ethan started working, it would be impossible to notice the time. "Sir, your 3 steaks and 1 standard set menu are still being prepared. Please wait patiently." Yuri twitched his nose and smelled it, confirming that everything on the plate was legal. He nodded to Ethan, who looked embarrassed, and took the lead in cutting off a large piece of steak and stuffing it into his mouth. Surprisingly, the food in this dark restaurant, which was engaged in shady business behind the scenes, tasted pretty good. He destroyed a whole piece of steak in a few bites. Under the watchful eyes of Ethan, who had just completed the cutting task, he took the knife and pointed at the 3rd steak. 2 steaks attack. The waiter who had been standing behind the bar observing the two people raised his eyebrows. He walked into the kitchen unhurriedly and said to the chef who was cleaning his bloody hands, "Hey, Tom, those two are not here to cause trouble. It seems that I just met a big eater." Tom wiped his hands and immediately put on his gloves and started working in the real kitchen. "That's really strange. How long has it been since we had any serious business?" The waiter chuckled, "Serious business? Tom, killing is a serious business for us." Yuri finished 3 steaks and drank a large bottle of beer. He nodded to the waiter who brought 5 steaks again and handed him the money for the 30 steaks and a standard set meal. With the other party's polite smile, he asked, "Sir, has your store considered food delivery service? It's not far away, right on the street." "This gentleman." The waiter put away the empty plates and asked, "Do you really not know what we do?" Yuri cut all 5 steaks into sizes that could fit into his mouth. He forked one of them and raised it up, but you also did a good job at your other job, didn't you? Chapter 14 The Greatest Work. Ethan held up a simple contract with the ink still wet and asked, "Boss, why are you only asking them to deliver meals for a month? Do you have any new plans after 1 month?" Yuri smiled mysteriously, and he put his arm around Ethan's shoulders. "Let's talk about things in a month. What you need to do now is to pick a qualified pair of fangs for our steel jacket in the shortest possible time." Evening. Ethan asked Yuri, who was busy imprinting magic patterns on the second floor, to eat the dinner sent by Hell's Kitchen together. Before leaving, he handed several drawings to Yuri, which detailed what weapons should be installed where, etc. Ethan rents his own house in New York, which is not far from the store. He can reach work in less than 10 minutes by bicycle. Yuri watched his clerk tremblingly ride away on his bicycle, said hello to old Rogers sitting at the door of the bookstore, closed the door and locked himself, and returned to the simple studio on the second floor. The armor was basically completed, just without the signature exterior paint. He took the drawings designed by Ethan, as if to see if there were any weapons that he could make now and install on the armor. The reality is hard and the answer is regrettable. These ammunition missiles always require some small but necessary elements, and these things Yuri simply can't get now. Jingle bell. Before Yuri could reach into his pocket, the call was automatically connected. Tony said in a guilty tone, "Hurry up and open the door, I'm right outside the store." Yuri took out the phone from his pocket and pulled a big cloth to cover the steam armor in front of him. He looked at the time on the phone and the sky outside, and asked in confusion, "Why are you so anxious? Now it's already dark, so no one should be able to see you, right?" Tony on the other end of the phone paused for a moment. He raised his feet and took 2 small steps. The sound of metal and stone colliding with each other was very abrupt in the quiet and deserted street. He silently made a note in his mind to add some texture to the soles of the armor's feet. Silencing function, and then pressed twice gently on the doorbell on the glass door. "Okay, Yuri, I didn't come alone, or I brought something with me." Yuri, who was going downstairs, could use his toes to think of what he had brought, but he still pretended to know nothing and asked, "So, the generous Tony Stark brought something to my shop again? A missile from 20 years ago with only a shell left?" Tony was silent again. He knew that the opening gift sent this morning was really not a good one, but he didn't expect Yuri to compare it with the steel armor he was wearing at this moment. He rang the doorbell twice and said viciously, "The two are not the same concept at all. What I am bringing now can be said to be the greatest work of my life." "Wow!" Yuri stood behind the one-way glass and admired the red gold steel armor dancing on the street. He also sincerely admired the man inside who was cursed by knowledge. A mortal body is as good as a god, and it is not the armor outside the skin, but the vicissitudes of the soul a few years later. He opened the door and murmured to the phone that he hadn't hung up yet, "I don't know if a little girl will love you 3,000 times after hearing these words." "What did you say? Are you shocked by it?" Tony Po walked around in front of the store wearing a steel suit. He squeezed into the small store, knocked on his glowing helmet and said, "As long as I wear this on my head, you will never be able to break through my head again. Thoughts, control my body, do you want to give it a try?" "No." Yuri poked the shining blue reactor on the chest of the steel suit with his finger. "There is a very interesting rule in Marvel. Anything that is controllable and beneficial is mostly blue in color, conversely. Those that are controllable, the ones that are low and harmful, are mostly green in color." He turned on his mobile phone camera, took a few group photos with his arms around the cold steel armor, and tapped Tony's iron head after taking pictures. "If I'm not mistaken, I'm the first one to see you, man of the greatest works. How about Tony, why don't you show your face to record this precious moment?" The steel armor was silent for a moment, and then the mask slowly opened. Tony glanced at Yuri with disgust, pretended to be impatient and said, "Hurry up and shoot." Crack kika. After taking the photo, Yuri walked to the second floor first. Listening to the clang, clatter, clatter of footsteps behind him, he secretly observed 3 seconds of silence for the stairs that were bearing the unbearable weight of life. The two of them came to the second floor one after another. Yuri walked up to the steam armor covered by a big cloth, and politely asked Tony to reveal its true face in person. "Mr. Stark, what you are about to see, it is the greatest work of Yuri Ambrosius." "Ha ha!" Tony sneered twice. Imitating other people's words is the most annoying thing. Pulling off the big cloth, the metal giant was once again exposed to the bright light. Yuri used his mind to control it to split open in the middle, revealing the human cockpit wrapped in buffer rubber. Tony's eyes flickered twice. This way of wearing is much more convenient than his own Mark I. He must learn it. Yuri walked into the cockpit, and the steel giant slowly closed. Mysterious lines flashed away, and dozens of streams of hot steam spurted out from the vents following the giant's movements. Boom! 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 The whole room shook slightly with the heavy footsteps, and Tony twitched his lips. He suddenly felt that it didn't matter whether the silencer device on the sole of his foot was installed or not. The wall facing the street was separated to both sides under Yuri's control. The bright moonlight outside the house shone on his face. Tony watched him keep walking towards the outside of the house, and directly turned on the flight mode due to the psychological effect of showing off his skills. Shoo! He was suspended in front of the heavy and tall metal giant, and said teasingly, "If you just jump down like this, you will probably have tea with the city administration as a guest tomorrow." Yuri kept walking, and his voice came from the iron giant, "Tony, if you confirm that all nearby monitoring facilities are paralyzed, I can generously let you see what a flying iron giant is." "Come on then." Tony closed his mask and ordered Jarvis, who was built into the armor, scan his armor to find his energy source. "As you wish, sir." Mysterious lines shone brightly, and thick and hot white steam burst out. The nearly 4-meter-tall steel giant lowered his head slightly, and his huge and heavy body floated in the air as lightly as a fish swimming in the water. After the scan, the armor does not have a centralized energy device. It seems to be able to continuously absorb water from the environment and obtain energy through a method similar to a steam engine. Steam engine. Tony was silent as he watched the steam surrounding the iron giant. Yuri got used to the feeling of flying, and excitedly invited Tony to take a high-altitude flight. "After that, we can also compete point to point to see who is better between you and me." The greatest work ever. Bursts of gunfire came from a distance. Tony and Yuri looked at each other, pointed at the source of the sound and said, "Then let's compete with each other to get there first and solve the problem that caused these noises." Chapter 15 Dr. Lizard. Osborne Building. Several helicopters hovered in the dark night sky, and beams of light crisscrossed and shone on a large, agile, and powerful lizard man on the street. A policeman and a soldier armed with long guns and short cannons fought together, and the shells were tilted at the green monster covered with scales as if it was free. "General, the radar has detected 2 UFOs approaching." The uniformed Major General in the armored vehicle took the display board handed by his subordinates and dialed the New York Sheriff directly. "George, has your support arrived?" "What?" Chief George, who was charging on the front line with a small pistol, looked up and saw 2 men in metal armor, one large and one small, quickly approaching the green monster that had climbed onto the Osborne building. "When did our police get such advanced equipment? These are not our people." "Hey, Yuri." Tony looked excited under the armor. Judging from the data detected by Jarvis, there was no doubt that he had reached the destination first. He was suspended on the side of the Osborne building. While scanning the big lizard lying on the wall, he issued a winner's declaration to Yuri, who had just arrived. "Based on the current results, you have admitted that my Mark I is the winner. Is it the greatest work yet?" "Do not." Yuri was not convinced. His steam armor did not have built-in navigation. Compared with Tony, who was flying on the best route, he encountered many situations along the way, buildings that were almost installed after turning a corner, etc. After carefully looking at the wires that could not be found at all, he finally decided to follow Tony to avoid causing some unnecessary harm to the city. "You should be able to know that our progress speeds are almost the same. The reason why I lag behind you is because my dad created a restaurant chain, and your dad created artificial intelligence." Jarvis. Tony shrugged. He didn't think there was anything wrong with people planting trees and enjoying the shade later. Just when he was about to chat with Yuri, who refused to admit defeat, he heard Jarvis's voice, "Mr. Skin completed, this creature is suspected to be a human individual after genetic mutation. It retains a certain amount of wisdom and memory. Its power is slightly weaker than your armor, but its recovery ability is extremely strong." "I saw." Tony clearly saw bullets drilling into the body of the lizard man, but before he could breathe, he was squeezed out by the wound that had regrown from the inside out. At this moment, a bright beam of light shone on Tony and Yuri, who were hanging side by side in the air. A loudspeaker amplified voice came from the helicopter hovering overhead, "Please report to your troops and land immediately. Please report to your troops. Troops and land immediately." Yuri and Tony looked at each other, accelerating and directly escaping the searchlight's lock. They scrambled to sprint towards the lizard man who was already approaching the top floor. No one said it, but everyone knew it, the second scene between the two's greatest works. The battle has already begun. Jarvis, Jessely missiles are ready. Lockdown complete, sir. Emission. The golden red Mark I's right arm armor opened, and a mini Jessely missile dragged a long tail flame and flew towards the green lizard that had already grasped the rooftop with one hand. The big lizard seemed to feel threatened. His big tail whipped hard, just hitting the missile before its kinetic energy had reached its peak. Boom! Although the missile is small in size, it is powerful. Raging fire waves mixed with surging shock waves swept across the entire floor. Tony's mouth twitched under the armor. He remembered that this seemed to be Norman Osborn's private space. Sir, Jarvis advises you not to reveal your identity, otherwise it may lead to hostility between Stark Industries and Osborn Industries. Wow, that's really good news. Tony replied nonchalantly. After seeing that Yuri's steam giant had already fought with the lizard man who jumped on the rooftop, he quickly started the propulsion device and ordered at the same time, Jarvis, analyze the combat mode, want both. At this moment, Yuri in the armor did not know that Tony, who was not far away, had already begun to prepare for the anti-Yuri series. He stretched out his hand to block Dr. Lizard's heavy punch. He was about to fight back but was unexpectedly knocked back. The thick tail that came out somewhere flew out. Tony, who was not far away, seized the opportunity, and another mini Jessely missile flew out of his left arm armor. Whoosh! A slender thread hit the missile, which was not very fast. The next moment, the thread tightened, and the missile was thrown directly into the empty sky. Boom! Tony gritted his teeth and stared at the fourth person in red and blue tights. The two missiles failed to cause any damage to the lizard man. He could already imagine how that bastard Yuri would laugh at him when he went back. The golden red shoulder armor was opened, and a small machine gun was pointed at the pervert in tights that could spin silk. Who are you? Are you with this lizard man? Why did you intercept my missiles? Okay, sir. The little spider raised his hands. While he was curiously looking at the two mechanical armors with completely different styles, he muttered, I have seen the power of your missiles. If it hits the doctor, he will die without a burial place. Yes, what I mean is that the doctor's crime is not worthy of death, or rather, he is still valuable. Well, you can't kill him anyway. Peter. The lizard man who was punched into the roof floor by Yuri, who stood up again, saw the little spider and shouted his name angrily. Stop being hypocritical. I think you are the one who wants to kill me the most. To shut up. Yuri punched Dr. Lizard on his bucket-thick neck. The huge force penetrated the skin and directly broke the fragile bones in the center. Looking at Dr. Lizard twitching on the ground, he suddenly felt a desire to the urge to devour him. Boom! 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 The thick metal arm hit the lizard man's neck again and again. Most creatures need a brain to control body movements. Once the cervical spine is broken, it will be a high paraplegia. This state is uncomfortable. You can see and hear, but you can't do anything. Very much like singles who can only practice traditional skills on their mobile phones. Yuri's 5 fingers pierced the flesh and blood on Dr. Lizard's neck, and directly grasped his cervical vertebrae as thick as his forearm. He avoided the spider's thread shot at him, directly ordered the armor to rise into the air, and looked at the incompetent and furious little spider, and the police and troops who had just arrived on the rooftop pointed to the green glass tube that was still on the ground by Dr. Lizard, and then under Dr. Lizard's resentful gaze, he once again broke the cervical vertebrae that was being repaired rapidly. He watched Tony grab the green glass tube and take off into the air. He shook the trophy in his hand like a show-off and said, only actual combat is the best way to test equipment. Tony, given the current situation, you have admitted my battle. Is A the greatest work? Tony rolled his eyes under the visor. He dodged a beam of searchlight directed at him and accelerated directly to fly in front of Yuri. Come to my place tonight, I think we may have a lot of work to do. Yuri shrugged and waved friendly to the little spider who was still jumping on the rooftop trying to get closer to him. He was curious about whose face under the hood belonged to that one. But the current scene was obviously not the time to explore this issue. He glanced at the Mark I armor that was getting further away in the night sky, turned around and chased after it. Without anyone noticing, he quietly hypnotized Dr. Lizard in his hand, and the turquoise transmission tubes penetrated deeply between his smooth green scales. Chapter 16 The Great Nephew. The tough transmission tubes were flashing with dark green light. The recovery speed of Dr. Lizard's broken cervical vertebrae was rapidly decreasing, while the healing superpower from Ajako and Yuri's body was beating at high frequency. The mysterious patterns sometimes expanded and sometimes contracted, and the golden light on them flickered. Waves of pleasure as if the soul were ascending to heaven hit him. Yuri braced himself and kept his speed, hanging behind Mark 1 not far away. "What did you do to me?" Dr. Lizard didn't realize something was wrong until this moment. According to usual experience, although the degeneration from the lizard state to the human state will take away the newly grown arms and huge strength, other injuries on the body will definitely be repaired before that. But as he was about to return to his human state, the injury to his cervical spine showed no signs of improvement. The doctor panicked. Losing the lizard state was not scary. What was scary was that he lost the ability to even grab the genetic medicine and inject it into his body. Yuri let out a long breath, looked down, and quickly withdrew the transmission tube inserted into the doctor's body. There was a difference between a full meal and a full meal, and he would undoubtedly choose the latter. "As you can see, your self-healing ability doesn't work in my hands. I advise you to take care of yourself and don't make any small moves. Our flight altitude is more than 3,000 meters above the ground. I don't think you can survive this." The self-healing factors began to take effect, and they converged on the doctor's neck, which was gradually returning to an adult. In just a few seconds, he was transformed from a high paraplegic to a one-armed hero. The doctor watched in pain as his arm shattered inch by inch. He held the arm of the steam armor tightly, for fear that he would accidentally fall. He believed that this metal giant was right. Not to mention that he was in human form now. Even if he fell from such a high place in the giant lizard state, he would definitely not survive. The large villa located on the coastline was already clearly visible, and two metal armors, one small and one large, slid along the runway into Tony's luxury garage. After the two stopped, Yuri threw the doctor directly to the ground. Seeing that Tony was still wearing armor and keeping vigilant, he waved his hand directly and said, "Don't worry about showing your face, Tony. When I leave you, I guarantee that he has forgotten it. Everything now." Dr. Lizard stood up from the ground on 3 legs. He looked at Yuri, who walked out of the steam armor with a horrified look on his face. "What do you mean by forgetting everything now? What did you do to me?" At this time, Tony was also taking off his suit little by little with the help of the mechanical assistant. After seeing the slightly sweaty face, Dr. Lizard exclaimed, "What the fuck? Tony Stark?" Tony ignored him and just stared at Yuri for confirmation. "You promise?" "I promise." Yuri nodded and gently snapped his fingers in the doctor's ear. "Tell me everything you know about the lizard you turned into." The doctor's eyes were glazed for a moment, and then he told the story without reservation about the causes and consequences of his transformation into a lizard monster. Yuri listened to the plot of The Amazing Spider-Man again, and was only slightly interested in the decay equation spoken by the doctor, because when he heard the specific content, the healing superpower in his body began to rhythm slightly again. But Tony pondered for a long time after listening to this. He finally understood why the little guy in the spider tights said that Dr. Lizard's crimes would not lead to death. So? Tony glanced at Yuri, who seemed to be thinking too. He leaned into the dull-eyed doctor's ear and asked quietly, "Do you know who the Spider Boy is?" "PhD. Tony." Yuri smiled at Tony Stark, who was embarrassed on the spot, pretending not to hear, and asked the doctor, "What did he ask you just now?" The doctor opened his mouth. "He asked me if I knew Spider-Man's true identity." Tony walked to Yuri's steam armor, bent over and stuck his butt out, trying to avoid this social death in the name of research. Yuri saw through it without revealing it, and deliberately asked loudly, "Not only Mr. Tony Stark, I am also very interested in this issue." The doctor understood. Spider-Man's true identity is Peter Parker, who is studying in high school. Shanghai School, once interned in my laboratory. His father was a great biologist, and the decay equation was his greatest work. At this moment, the artificial intelligence Jarvis suddenly asked through the external speaker, "Mr. Stark, are you generating a file for this person?" After staring at a certain vent on the back of the steam suit for a long time, Tony's mouth twitched and he had to show his head. He decided to educate Jarvis as soon as Yuri left, at least let him know when to speak. When not to speak. "Build it." Tony pretended to be nonchalant. He leaned on the steam suit, waved his hand and said, "If anything happens again, you can call me. There are guests at home, right? You will scare them." Yuri hugged the bear and shrank his head in cooperation. "Yes, Jarvis, I'm really scared of you." Cough cough. Tony cleared his throat, raised the corners of his mouth and narrowed his eyes in a formal smile. Then Mr. Yuri, please move to the living room. I think drinking some wine can alleviate your fear, what do you think? Yuri nodded and agreed happily. He pointed at Dr. Lizard who was standing dumbly and asked, what about him? Does he want to drink with us too? Just forget it. Tony shook his head decisively. He didn't want to drink to his heart's content, and someone sitting there suddenly threw up his head, howled, and then transformed into a lizard man. Okay then. Yuri raised his right hand slightly, and the steam armor slowly cracked from the middle. The golden pupils turned white in an instant, and then the doctor walked in consciously. Crack, click, click. An eyebrow on Tony's handsome face was raised high. He leaned back, pointed a finger at the steam armor that had shrunk by one size and said, if I'm not mistaken, you locked him in. Yes. Yuri snapped his fingers to put the doctor in the steam suit into a deep sleep, erasing all his memories of the last hour. The pure white disappears and the brilliant gold appears again. Yuri stared intently at a certain mustache with twinkling eyes. There will always be some people who have some bad thoughts and enter my armor through some means, and I will let them understand what it means to catch a turtle in a urn and close the door. Beat the dog. Wow. Tony turned around and left. He would never admit that some people were him. How could the great Tony Stark leave his greatest work aside and get involved in some people's less than great works? He silently jotted down something in his notebook, and signed it as a binocular patient who judged a gentleman with a villain's heart. Jingle bell. Tony turned on the phone. It was now 2200 hours New York time sharp, and the caller ID turned out to be his dear Uncle Obeiday. Beep. The call was connected, and Obeiday's rich voice came from the receiver, eldest nephew, aren't you at home? Chapter 17 Yuri's third transaction. Tony glanced at Yuri who turned around unconsciously. He thought for a moment and asked again, how did you get in? What do you want from me? Oh, my dear nephew. Obadiah on the other end of the phone sighed deeply. He shook the glass of amber wine, took a deep breath of his cigar and said, no matter who Jarvis is, he will never reject the master's uncle outside the door. I'm in the living room, come quickly. Beep. Tony put the phone in his pocket, turned around and forced a smile to Yuri, well, I might have to go to the living room to deal with some other things, so. Yuri nodded, secretly wondering if this was the final plot of Iron Man. Did Obadiah come to this villa before he snatched the reactor from Tony's chest? Jarvis. Jingle bell. Tony took out his cell phone and looked at it. Holishaw blurted out. He glared at the camera above his head angrily, Jarvis, what are you calling? Sir, this is what you asked for. Yuri smiled unkindly, but this smile was particularly ironic in Tony's eyes. He was so angry that he couldn't even control his mustache, the two lively hairs twitched a few times, and the lower lips opened and closed a few times. Finally, he said softly, Jarvis, take Yuri to the guest room first. We will talk about it later. As you wish, sir. This way, Mr. Ambrosius. After watching Yuri turn a corner and disappear, he took out his phone again and looked at the time, 22:15. Okay. He simply arranged his hair and tugged at his collar and front, I want to keep this meeting within 5 minutes. Tony walked into the living room. It was dark inside and no lights were turned on. He reached out to turn on the light, but found that there was no one in the living room. Obeidy. No one answered. Tony didn't care. He shrugged, picked up the opened wine bottle and poured some amber wine into the new wine glass. He sat heavily on the sofa. Tonight, he was experimenting with armor and catching lizard monsters, it's just too tiring. Jingle bell. Tony took out his cell phone, why is Pepper calling so late? He sniffed and answered the phone. The next moment, harsh sound waves hit him. The veins on Tony's face were exposed, and he immediately lost control of his body. Tony. Tony, are you there? Hello. A big hand stretched out from behind the sofa. He took the phone he had just connected and hung up it decisively. Take a deep breath. Obadiah's big bald head shone in the light of the fire. He proudly raised the gadget in his right hand to where Tony could see it. Remember this thing? It's a pity that the government didn't do it at that time. Approved, temporary paralysis is still very useful in many cases. Obeiday took off his earplugs and walked around from behind the sofa. He bent down and took out a reactor stripper that had been hidden in the sofa for a long time. He stretched it out to Tony and made a leisurely declaration of victory. Zi. The high temperature caused the clothes covering the surface of the microreactor to burn, and the burning sensation made Tony open his mouth involuntarily, but due to the paralysis effect, he did not make a sound. Because you still have to lay the last golden egg. Obadiah held up the faintly glowing light blue reactor to show off in front of Tony. He is so beautiful, Tony. This is the 9th symphony you created, and it will be your legacy. Just when he was about to continue his emotion, Pepper's second call came. Obadiah grabbed the phone and hung up immediately, and put the reactor into the box with regret on his face. It's a pity that you involved Pepper. I originally wanted her to live. Tony's breathing quickened in an instant, and he tried his best, but his eyes only moved slightly. At this moment, he was extremely envious of the Spider Boy who could fight Mark with his body alone. If only he had that kind of power. The paralysis gradually wore off, and Tony struggled a few times and finally grabbed the phone that was close at hand. Yuri. 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 I found you. Tony dialed the phone tremblingly. He could feel the fragments slowly approaching his beating heart. Come on. Hello. Tony swore to God that he had never felt someone's voice so beautiful and beautiful. He raised the phone to his face and asked for help without hesitation. Come to the living room, Yuri, I'm dying. Wow. Yuri on the other end of the phone smiled slightly. It seemed that today was not only the end of Dr. Lizard, but also the day of Tony Stark's murder of his uncle. It's a really good day. He jumped up from the soft big bed, opened the door and shouted to the corridor, Jarvis. Take me to the living room, Tony said he is dying. As you wish, sir. Following Jarvis's voice prompts, he quickly saw Tony slumped on the sofa and confessing his last words to Pepper. The Marvel Mako didn't even crawl this time. As if he wasn't worried about Yuri at all. Come to save him. That's it, Pepper, we'll talk later. When Tony saw Yuri walking in from the living room door, he hung up the phone decisively. He pointed to the hole in his chest with his chin, stared at Yuri and asked with determination, you must have something to do, right? Right? Whether it's magic or something else. Crack. Crack. Yuri quickly took 2 photos. At this time, Tony no longer cared about his own face. If you can save me, I can even give you the photos. No. 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 Yuri put away his phone, approached Tony and asked, Injured Tony, I have 2 plans here. Do you want plan 1 or plan 2? Both. Tony has indeed grown up a lot. He grabbed Yuri's hand, and for the first time, he didn't feel a trace of disgust. Save me now, now. How about we make a deal? Yuri raised his right hand, and a ball of golden energy full of vitality slowly floated in it. I will help you completely heal the wound. As a deal, you will use the reactor. I promise. Tony didn't even hear the words, he just grabbed Yuri's right hand and pressed it on his chest. The energy ball instantly dispersed into the flesh and blood near the wound. Tony roared and grabbed the fabric cover of the sofa. Itchy, it's so itchy, it's so itchy. The granulations that are thinner than a hair proliferate rapidly. They forcefully squeeze out the ammunition fragments and reactor residues that do not belong to this body. It looks like a constipated patient trying his best to excrete waste. Plop. Plop. Yuri caught all the fragments in a glass filled with amber wine. After finishing, he stuffed them into Tony, who was gasping for breath, and asked, Is it Obade? It's Opadri. Tony touched his flat and smooth chest, with a mixture of surprise and anger on his face. He betrayed me and my father, and now I want to judge him. For what? Yuri looked curious. Is there an iron shell without energy? Well. Tony stood up from the sofa, patted Yuri on the shoulder, and strode forward. We still have to go to the garage. Chapter 18 Uncle Killing and Summoning. The poor Dr. Lizard was obviously still sleeping soundly, but Tony, who was overly vigilant, tied him up with a rope and stuffed him into the car. After confirming that everything was correct, 2 armors, one large and one small, rose into the sky again. Lack of energy, sir. Tony looked up at the numbers on the virtual pitch, turned around suddenly, and lay directly on the steam armor following behind. What the hell are you doing? Yuri made a 10086-degree spin and sent Tony flying, but the latter quickly posted up with a stern face. Is there a lack of energy? Please forgive me. Don't even think about $2,000. Make a deal. In this way, Yuri and Tony arrived at Stark Tower in confusion. Still far away, Tony saw that the Iron Overlord, who was about the same height as Yuri's steam armor, was swinging his fist at his most beloved woman. And go! Bang! Iron Overlord was hit by Tony and staggered to the ground. Tony was not much better, Iron Overlord was too big and too hard. Even though Tony's shock absorption was very good, he was still shaken by the aftermath. Tony! Obeiday drove the Iron Overlord up from the ground. He let go of Pepper, who was screaming uncontrollably, and strode towards Tony, who was lying on the ground and struggling to stand up. Crack-click! After all, Iron Overlord failed to get close to Tony. Yuri fell from the sky and hit it directly on the shoulder. The heavy body of the steam armor carried huge kinetic energy, and after a moment of impact, it directly crushed the two steel giant arms of the Iron Overlord. No! Obeiday watched helplessly as 10 sharp fingers pierced the mask and penetrated his eyes. The next moment, a tooth-crushing sound of tearing could be heard. Iron Overlord's protective cover was torn off by the steam armor with brute force. Hi, Obeiday! Yuri flicked his bald head with his fingers, controlled his strength, pinched the collar and lifted him out. It's so crowded in there, come out, there's your nephew outside. Tony forced himself to get up from the ground. He first helped Pepper, whose legs were weak and fell to the ground, and then fist-bumped the steam armor who was stepping on Obeiday. Thank you, Yuri. Obadiah's back was suppressed and he couldn't move. After hearing this, his old red face was filled with anger. Yuri Ambrosius. Do you want to die for interfering in Stark Industries' family affairs? Crack! Yuri used a little force under his feet and without any hesitation, he crushed Obeiday's spine. Severe pain mixed with numbness swept through his brain, and in the next moment, Obeiday could no longer feel his body from his chest down. Yuri raised his foot and stepped on Obeiday without hesitation. As a mutant race that exterminated the dinosaurs, breaking the enemy's spine was an instinct imprinted deep in their genes. What did you do to me? Obeiday turned over on his arms, and frantically slapped those unconscious body parts in order to feel even the slightest pain. Median paraplegia. Yuri flew up with a kick, and his toes the size of winter melons landed heavily on Obadiah's stomach. Tony might be lucky with this uncle, but after this kick, unless he transforms into a super soldier, he will definitely die within a month. When Obeiday's bald head hit Tony's breastplate, one of the uncle and nephew was paraplegic and the other was dizzy. So they hugged each other again and fell together. Tony! Tony! Faced with life and death, Obeiday was actually immune to the dizzy effect of a passive headbutt. He pressed his upper body on the red and gold mark armor, and slapped Tony's mask with one hand at high frequency. He is my uncle who has watched you since you were a child. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. You are not my uncle. Tony grabbed Obadiah's back collar and tried to pull him away, but he didn't expect that the old guy hugged him so tightly that his clothes were torn and he couldn't pull him off. Tony had no choice but to press him down with a reflex. Just as he was about to stand up, he heard a strange metal knocking sound coming from the chest armor area. Looking down, Tony smiled angrily. Obadiah was holding the extractor that had just been removed from the new reactor, trying hard to make it complete its mission again. Haha! Tony stood up with a sneer. He snatched the extractor from Obeiday's hand and smashed it with 5 fingers. Countless fragments of debris hit Obeiday's face, and some even fell into the air before he could do it. In the closed mouth, Tony let go of his hand and pointed his buzzing palm towards Obadiah's bald head. Bah! A round hole as thick as a thumb suddenly appeared in the middle of Obeiday's eyebrow. The night wind blew, and the white smoke produced by the burnt flesh and blood dispersed into the air and disappeared. Yuri breathed a sigh of relief. The grass was cut, and the roots were removed, and he could finally sleep peacefully tonight. Deng deng deng. A rush of footsteps came from the lobby on the first floor of the Stark building. The steam armor and the mark armor looked at each other, and the latter waved his hand and said, "You go first, I will take care of it here." The steam suit shrugged comically, "I want to ask Dr. Lizard what to do." Tony was silent for a moment after hearing this, and he thought of the helpless himself in the living room again. "Leave it with me for now, and I will send it to you after this matter is dealt with." Yuri was keenly aware of something wrong, but he couldn't find the specific reason after much thought. Maybe he wants to know more about his future biological son, Little Spider. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and you could even vaguely see the bald man running at the front with a gun. Yuri no longer hesitated, and said a simple goodbye to Pepper not far away, then raised his head and let go, and then the huge steam armor soaring straight into the sky. After an hour and a half, a small island off the coast of New York. A huge steam armor fell from the sky. After confirming that there was no one around, Yuri controlled the armor to separate, and he walked out slowly. Mysterious lines flickered in the muscles and bones. Yuri's skin turned from white to blue, and his golden pupils separated strangely. His figure quickly grew taller and expanded. Roar! Certain information was transmitted to the surroundings with the sound. Yuri, who had regained his mutant body, stretched out his muscles and bones. Dozens of transmission tubes behind his head twisted and swayed, looking extremely terrifying under the moonlight. Chirp! The clear chirping was mixed with unconcealable joy, and a strange bird with a wingspan larger than a truck swooped down from the sky. Its huge blue-black claws dug deeply into the soil, forcibly stopping the huge kinetic energy. Yuri smiled and patted the bird's head, which couldn't help but arch into his arms. He let out a series of low roars of unknown meaning. The big bird fluttered its wings and soared into the sky again. It circled above Yuri's head for a few times and then flew away into the distance. Go! Not long after the giant bird flew away, a big head suddenly broke through the water and emerged, moo. Yuri simply didn't wait for it to climb ashore, and conveyed the same command with a low roar, roar. Go and fill your stomach, and I will grant you another evolution. Chapter 19. 5 giant mutant beasts arrived and left one after another. Yuri stood there and let out a breath. There are still too few people. He has never forgotten his true identity. He is a member of the mutant tribe and his leader. It is not only his obligation but also his responsibility to lead the tribe to prosperity and rejuvenation. Arctic. Captain America Popsicles? The corner of Yuri's mouth raised. I really just want to dig out the clan members. If I accidentally dig out a certain man with the stars and stripes, it might really be an accident. Chirp. Those flying in the sky are much faster than those swimming in the water and running on the ground. The giant bird swooped into the sea, swam for tens of meters, and then suddenly burst out of the water. Yuri hugged its slender neck, and at the same time controlled the dozens of transmission tubes behind it to flick the feathers on its head like fingers. Are you full? Chirp. Then let's start now. The giant bird squatted down obediently, with a pair of big eyes full of joy mixed with a trace of nervousness. Although it will become stronger every time it evolves, the pain in the process cannot be ignored. Yuri waved his hand and scattered several black metal balls. They had trapped Mockery, who had super speed, in Iraq, but these gadgets found from Fasto's house after killing him were obviously more than just that. Effect. Gather energy, store objects, bind, release energy, change gravity. Without a doubt, this is the greatest work of Fasto's. The invisible dark energy was continuously absorbed by the black balls suspended in the air. After transformation, the bright golden energy exuding the breath of life was all absorbed by Yuri standing in the ball formation. But Yuri is not the final site of these energies. After his integration, all the life energy gathered in his body was finally introduced into the big bird through the transmission tube that expanded to the thickness of a finger. Chirp. The big bird was shaking in pain, but with its leader in front, it didn't dare to make any move. The red, blue, and green feathers fell one by one, the big bird's bones and muscles made a frightening friction sound, pink blood mist sprayed out from the 12 pores on the body, and then its size was visible to the naked eye. The speed is rapidly shrinking. Ajako's ability is by no means as simple as healing injuries. From the moment he got it, Yuri felt that he could transform any living thing, wherever the life energy went, he could even give birth to a new one out of thin air. Organs. Blessed by God, the first unsure transformation was perfectly successful, and his only 5 subordinates had all achieved a huge improvement in a certain aspect. This is not a healing recovery at all, it is more like the product of the combined abilities of some celestial clan. Just as I was thinking about it, the transformation of the big bird was coming to an end, the green, red, and blue colors on its skin slowly faded away, replaced by a touch of smooth and white human skin, hair, facial features, limbs, 5 internal organs, 6 internal organs, front and back. Warp. Yuri took back the transmission tube and took out a large windbreaker that he had prepared long ago and put it on Guonu. From now on, your name is Vinax Ambrosius, remember? Vinax Ambrosius. The woman repeated the name and curiously opened and put down her windbreaker. Master, is this a human body? Yuri helped to zip up and fasten the buttons, gave her a portable computer and kicked it aside without hesitation. When you're done, go and learn common sense about human society. Next one. Vinax, Phoenix. Shak, Shark. Tiger, Tiger. Chat, Cheetah. Kate, civet. Before the first ray of sunlight shone on free America, Yuri returned to the ancestral handicraft shop with 5 tribesmen who had turned into human forms. These people still needed at least a week of common sense learning, and the teacher could only it's Yuri himself. First, from now on, I will be called boss from master. And many more. Vanax raised his onion-like right hand high, then boss, will you pay us wages? A boss who said on the phone that he won't pay wages is not worthy of being a boss. Yuri's face was black. Not worthy. CO author, you think the boss is more senior than the master, right? Second, if anyone asks about your origins in the future, just say that you were found by me from the refugee camp. And many more. Although Vanax didn't get the answer to the first question, it didn't stop her from asking the second question enthusiastically. Can't it be said that she woke up from the ice cave? Boss, I remember you at that time, it's still holding me down. Can't. Yuri glanced around. The other 4 people were all listening seriously, showing no sign of asking any weird questions. She glanced at Vanax suspiciously. Did I give her less energy when her brain was developing? Third, learn to control the power you have, and learn to suppress your violent emotions and bloody instincts. This is a human society. If someone accidentally kills someone, we will all be in trouble. And many more. Vanax got the answer to the second question, so she asked the third answer more enthusiastically. Killing by mistake will cause trouble, but what about intentional killing? Yuri tried his best to suppress his violent emotions and bloody instincts. He could hardly control his impulse to kill. I mean no killing. Stupid bird. Oh. Vanax nodded vigorously, not feeling offended at all. She stood in line with her 4 friends again, staring at Yuri with a pair of big bright eyes, waiting for him to make his 4th request. Yuri was silent for a moment, then waved his hand and used the steel on the 2nd floor to build 4 large beds. Except for Vanax, everyone else will choose one. What about me? What about me? Vanax was quite eye-catching about these 4 big beds. It was said on the mobile phone that after laying down spring mattresses, people would lie on them and cover their whole bodies with quilts. From the outside, no one could be seen at all. I don't know 2 people. Vanax stared at Yuri with his beautiful eyes, waiting for his answer. Yuri sighed softly and turned around to walk to the 3rd floor. This stupid bird was so stupid. He was afraid that this stupidity would be transmitted to the other 4 generals. Follow me, you, and I will live on the 3rd floor. Good. Excitedly, Vanax jumped up on the spot, his thick blue hair wrapped around his not-so-intelligent head, and hit the ceiling fiercely. She didn't even look at the 4 big iron beds that she was envious of just now, and chased Yuri up to the 3rd floor. What's so good about spring mattresses? Can they be held by the boss and sleep soundly? The 4 people who stayed on the 2nd floor watched Vanax disappear around the corner. Shaq glanced at the stern-faced Kate without leaving a trace. She was the only woman among the 4 people standing. He seemed to be saying to himself, boss definitely going to mate with her. Kate heard this and sat down on an iron bed by the window. She took out her laptop computer, as if she was studying. The remaining 3 people looked at each other, each picked a bed and sat down gently on it. They also took out their laptops in a dignified manner. In fact, they secretly pricked their ears, hoping to hear something suitable for all ages from upstairs. Chapter 20. Boss, why aren't you sleeping yet? Vanax's 2 long legs tightly tied Yuri's waist. And his 2 white and strong arms were wrapped around Yuri's neck. She leaned her head closer and blew hot air into Yuri's ears along with the voice, if you can't sleep, can you teach me how to study? Yuri really can't sleep. Human shame and beastly desire were fighting each other in his brain, and he regretted making the woman in his arms so beautiful. Teach me, teach me. Vanax didn't notice her dangerous situation at all. She thrust, and finally succeeded in taking away the remaining sanity of Yuri. Yuri pressed the silly bird under him fiercely. Do you want me to teach you? Vanax saw the desire in Yuri's trembling golden eyes. She looked away evasively and involuntarily tightened her jade arms around Yuri's neck. I think. Crack. The door was locked. The silencer function is activated. Kate, who was on the 2nd floor, completely lost her voice on the 3rd floor and smashed the laptop in her hand. She looked around at the 3 people who dared not speak, and lay on the hard iron bed without saying a word. I'll let you go first today, and tomorrow morning I will occupy the boss's bed. Do you want to mate with the boss? Lie down on the 2nd floor and listen. Noon. Yuri, who had been busy in bed all morning, carried Vanax out of the bathroom. Have you learned enough? Yuri threw the stupid bird on the bed and dressed in front of the mirror. He turned on the phone and found that his good employee Ethan had made more than a dozen calls one after another throughout the morning. Okay. Vanax obviously hasn't adapted to the human body yet. She subconsciously shakes her body, trying to get rid of the water droplets on her body surface. Clap clap clap. When Yuri turned around, he happened to see two large granaries swinging at a high frequency. His handsome face instantly elongated, and he walked over and wrapped the silly bird into a piece of sushi with a quilt. Boss, what are you doing? To shut up. Yuri opened the door and walked out, only to hear a flurry of activity on the second floor. When he went down to take a look, he called him a good guy. 3 big men huddled in a trench coat, and Kate had 3 to herself, 1 for the bed, 1 for her body, and another to cover herself with. Boss! 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 Yuri walked to the bedside of Kate, the only one who didn't say hello, and immediately saw a corner of the portable computer that was hidden despite its efforts. Boss! Kate knew she couldn't hide it anymore. She sat up from the bed, lowered her head and took out her laptop from the quilt. Well, I accidentally disabled it. Yuri just stared at her. Kate forced herself to look at Yuri for a few seconds, but eventually she was defeated by the leader's strong pressure. She got out of bed and stood close to Yuri, rubbing her head on Yuri's arm. I want to fuck him too. Mating with the boss on the 3rd floor. The corner of Yuri's mouth twitched. He pushed Kate away and said as he walked, it's full of mating, how decent it is. You are all waiting for me here. I will buy you some clothes. A trace of excitement flashed across Kate's cold and pretty face. Cats are very sensitive animals. She knew that the boss had already agreed in his heart. All he had to do tonight was to climb up to the big bed on the 3rd floor earlier than that stupid bird. Yuri didn't know what Kate was thinking. He opened the security door in the corridor and thought about what kind of clothes he should buy later. Boss! After turning the corner, Ethan came up to him with an anxious look on his face. He grabbed one of Yuri's sleeves and kept complaining, there is an agent outside who claims to be from the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau and has been in the store. I've called you more than a dozen times, why didn't you come out until now? Snake shield? Yuri took off Ethan's hand and took advantage of the last flight of stairs to straighten his collar. The name of this thing is quite long, but it needs output but not output, and it needs defense but not defense. In the end, even the funds for the Avengers came from Tony Stark Group. The only things that Mayor Foxia can take out may be the beep machine that has been hoarded for more than 10 years and the cosmic cube that is actually controlled by Hydra. Slightly crowded 1st floor. At a glance, Yuri saw the friendly Agent Carlson, the head of the novice village, with a hairline that reached the Tianling cap. Nice to meet you, Mr. Yuri Ambrosius. My name is Phil Carlson, from the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. You can call me Carlson. Smiling, no one could refuse the hand extended by Coulson. Yuri nodded politely, clenched his right hand into a fist and gently hammered Coulson's hand of friendship. Coulson didn't feel there was anything embarrassing about this. He crossed his hands in front of his lower abdomen very naturally and explained the purpose of his visit. We learned from Tony that he was here last night, so what about the appearance last night? Do you know any information about the steel armor of Osborn Tower and Stark Tower? Yuri chuckled, Tony would never give him away so easily. Worthy of being an elite social master among humans, Carlson heard Yuri's suspicion and took out a document directly from his handbag and handed it to Yuri. Agreement on permanent transfer of special items. It says, the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Agency permanently transfers the belongings of Howard Stark to his son Tony Stark and so on, and the last page of the document is clearly signed Tony Stark. Graham's name. He just sold me out. Yuri shook the document in his hand, and the paper collided and made a squeaking sound. This plot is wrong. Could it be that Tony's injury was completely cured, causing a butterfly effect in the world? Carlson smiled again, this is just a deal, Mr. Ambrosius. We exchanged his father's relics that should have been permanently sealed for some information about last night. Tony said you are too humanoid flying driver of things. This bastard. Yuri scolded the low character of a certain mustache in his heart, it's fine if you sell me, why do you want to pour dirty water on me before the transaction? What does pilot of 2 humanoid flying objects mean? Since you are unkind first, then don't blame me for being unrighteous. All right. Yuri pretended to be I'm so sorry that you found out the truth, and then said loudly and indignantly, "Mr. Carlson, I am indeed the driver of the two humanoid flying objects as Tony said, but who is driving them? It's not important, I think their inventor is the key to the problem." Carlson heard something in his words, so he hurriedly asked, "Do you know who is their inventor?" I know. But this inventor is my dearest relative, friend, and brother." Yuri rubbed his thumb and index finger solemnly, "We have to pay more." End of this chapter. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.